The security cameras at Jeepers restaurant captured the moment that would soon spark national outrage. On a sunny June afternoon, Army veteran David Dumar stood motionless, his prosthetic leg visible beneath his shorts, while his German Shepherd service dog Layla pressed protectively against his remaining leg. The restaurant manager's words hung in the air. "I'm sorry, sir, but your dog is making other customers uncomfortable. You'll have to leave." 7-year-old Emily Anderson, celebrating her birthday, watched in horror as her hero, the man who had promised her dying father he'd always be there, was being asked to leave her party. Her small hands clutched her unopened presents as tears streamed down her face. "But Daddy said Uncle David is a hero," she sobbed, her voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. What happened in the next few minutes would not only divide a tight-knit Michigan community, but would also force America to confront its treatment of those who sacrificed everything for their country. Nobody in that restaurant could have predicted how this seemingly routine complaint would unravel a web of connections stretching back to the battlefields of Afghanistan. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Staff Sergeant David Dumar wasn't always the quiet man who frequented the local coffee shops with his German Shepherd. Before the ambush in Afghanistan's Kandahar province, he was known for his infectious laugh and the way he could lift his entire unit's spirits with just a few words. At 34, his weathered face and graying temples told the story of 3 tours to in Iraq and that final fateful mission in Afghanistan. In his previous life, David had been inseparable from his best friend and fellow soldier Michael Anderson. They'd grown up together in Sterling Heights, Michigan, played high school football on the same team, and enlisted on the same day. When Michael fell in that ambush, his last words to David weren't about himself, they were about his little girl, Emily. "Promise me you'll be there for her birthdays," he had whispered through blood-stained lips. David made that promise while holding his friend's hand just moments before the explosion that took his own leg. Layla came into David's life during his darkest days at Walter Reed Medical Center. The German Shepherd, specially trained as a service dog, became more than just a mobility aid. She became his anchor to reality during the nightmares that plagued his sleep, his steady companion during physical therapy, and his bridge back to a world that suddenly seemed foreign. Unlike people who sometimes stared too long at his prosthetic leg or awkwardly avoided eye contact, Layla's warm brown eyes never held anything but unwavering loyalty. She learned to anticipate his needs before even he knew them, pressing against his left side when his balance wavered, or gently waking him before the night terrors could take hold. For 6 years, David had kept his promise to Michael, never missing a single one of Emily's birthdays. The little girl had grown up knowing him as Uncle David, the man who told her stories about her father's bravery and brought Layla, whom Emily had come to love almost as much as her father's memory. What should have been a joyous celebration of Emily's 7th birthday at Jeepers restaurant was about to become a moment that would test not just David's resilience, but an entire community's understanding of sacrifice, dignity, and what it truly means to welcome home our warriors. The morning of June 15th dawned with promise as David Dumar meticulously pressed his navy blue button-down shirt, the one Michael had given him before their last deployment. His hands trembled slightly as he pinned the small American flag to his lapel, a ritual he performed before every one of Emily's birthdays. Layla sat patiently by his side, her service vest freshly brushed, tags polished and properly displayed. On the kitchen counter lay a carefully wrapped package, a handmade photo album filled with pictures of Michael Anderson from their service days. Emily was turning 7, the same age David had been when he first met her father on the Little League baseball field. He had spent months preparing this gift, collecting photos from old military buddies and carefully writing captions that captured Michael's spirit. Sarah Anderson, Emily's mother, had helped him choose which stories would be appropriate for a 7-year-old, careful to shield her daughter from the harsher realities of war while preserving her father's memory. The drive to Jeepers restaurant at Lakeside Mall was filled with a familiar anxiety. Public places had become a challenge since his return, but Layla's steady presence helped keep the memories at bay. Through the rearview mirror, he watched her sitting alertly, her training evident in her calm demeanor. The restaurant had been Emily's choice. She loved the bright lights and cheerful atmosphere, so different from the quiet gatherings they usually had at home. In the parking lot, Davin took extra time checking Layla's service dog documentation and ID cards. Experience had taught him to be prepared for questions, though he hated having to justify his need for her. He rehearsed the calm responses he had learned in therapy. She's a trained service animal. Yes, she's required for my disability. No, I'm not comfortable discussing my private medical history. The words felt bitter in his mouth, but they were better than the anger that sometimes threatened to surface when people challenged his right to have Layla with him. As he made his final adjustments to his prosthetic leg, a group of mall shoppers passed by, their curious glances lingering a moment too long. Davin straightened his shoulders, remembering his sergeant's words, "You carry not just your own honor, but the honor of every soldier who served." With Layla at his side, he took a deep breath and headed toward the restaurant entrance, unaware that this birthday celebration would become a turning point not just in his life, but in the lives of an entire community. The cheerful bells above Jeepers' entrance chimed as Davin and Layla stepped into the restaurant's warm atmosphere. The aroma of pizza and birthday cake mingled with the sound of children's laughter. Emily, spotting them from across the room, let out a squeal of delight that momentarily turned heads. "Uncle Davin's here," she announced, her voice carrying over the arcade game's electronic symphony. Sarah Anderson, Emily's mother, approached with a welcoming smile, though Davin noticed the slight redness around her eyes. These celebrations were always bittersweet for her. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, embracing him. "Michael would be so proud of how you've kept your promise." Layla maintained her professional composure, staying close to Davin's left side as they navigated through the maze of tables. The initial reception from the restaurant staff was courteous. A young waitress named Jenny promptly brought a water bowl for Layla, placing it discreetly under their table. "My brother served in the Marines," she shared quietly, her understanding evident in the way she positioned Davin's chair to give him extra space for his prosthetic leg. The other children at the party were fascinated by Layla, but respectfully kept their distance after Sarah explained that the German Shepherd was working. For the first hour, everything proceeded smoothly. Davin watched Emily open her presents, his heart swelling as she saved his package for last, a tradition she had insisted upon since she was 4. Layla lay perfectly still beneath the table, her alert eyes constantly monitoring her handler while remaining unobtrusive to other diners. However, the peaceful atmosphere began to shift when the afternoon crowd started filling in. Davin noticed the subtle changes, the nervous glances from a group of mothers at a nearby table, the whispered conversations behind hands, the way some patrons deliberately chose tables farther from their section. A particularly loud group was seated at the adjacent table, their children pointing and discussing Layla's size with mounting anxiety. An older woman in an expensive beige suit, later identified as Karen Mitchell, kept stealing concerned looks at their table while speaking in hushed tones to her companions. Her body language grew increasingly agitated as she observed Layla's presence. What Davin couldn't know at that moment was that Karen Mitchell had her own connection to his past, one that would soon turn this birthday celebration into something none of them could have anticipated. As Emily prepared to blow out her candles, the tension in the air was palpable, like the heavy atmosphere before a storm. Davin caught Sarah's eye, and they shared a knowing look, both veterans of different kinds of battles, both recognizing the signs of impending conflict. The moments before the confrontation were filled with what would later seem like poignant irony. Emily, standing on her chair despite her mother's gentle protests, was sharing her favorite story about Uncle Davin with her friends. "He saved my daddy's whole team once," she declared proudly, her small hands gesturing enthusiastically, "and Layla helps him be brave when he remembers the scary things." Sarah caught Davin wiping his eyes discreetly, knowing how these innocent revelations affected him. The other parents at the immediate party table had warmed to his presence, particularly after watching his careful interactions with their children. Mr. Thompson, a local school teacher, had engaged Davin in a thoughtful conversation about veteran support programs in their community. The restaurant's owner, Rebecca Collins, had even stopped by their table briefly to compliment Layla's impeccable behavior. "I've never seen a service dog so well trained," she remarked, noting how the German Shepherd maintained her vigilant but calm demeanor. This comment would later make the ensuing events even more difficult to comprehend. Jenny, the waitress, continued providing attentive service, ensuring Davin's water glass remained full and occasionally checking if Layla needed her water bowl refreshed. She shared stories about her Marine brother's readjustment to civil life, creating a momentary connection that made the restaurant feel more welcoming. As Emily prepared to blow out her candles, the entire party gathered around their table. The birthday song began, with Davin's deep voice carrying the melody. Even some nearby diners joined in, creating a brief moment of community that transcended the growing undercurrent of tension. Layla remained perfectly positioned by Davin's chair, her presence both protective and unobtrusive. It was during this harmonious moment that Karen Mitchell rose from her table, her face set with determination. She caught the eye of Sarah Martinez, the shift manager, and beckoned her over with an imperious gesture. Their whispered conversation, punctuated by Karen's pointed glances toward Layla, would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge not just Davin's dignity, but the very values the community claimed to uphold. The candles on Emily's cake flickered, waiting for her wish, unaware that in mere moments this celebration of life would become a battlefield of a different kind, one where the wounds inflicted would be invisible but no less real than those Davin had sustained in combat. Sarah Martinez approached Davin's table with measured steps, her restaurant manager's badge catching the fluorescent light. Her face wore the practiced neutral expression of someone about to handle a delicate situation, but her hands betrayed her nervousness, repeatedly smoothing her already pristine apron. "Mr. Doomer," she began, her voice barely audible above the arcade machines, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" The birthday song's final notes had barely faded, and Emily still held her breath, ready to make her wish. The timing couldn't have been worse. Davin felt the familiar tightening in his chest as Layla pressed closer to his leg, sensing his increasing anxiety. The German Shepherd's training kicked in immediately, providing gentle pressure therapy against his left side. Around the table, conversation stuttered to a halt as parents and children alike sensed the shift in atmosphere. Through the corner of his eye, Davin could see Karen Mitchell's table. She sat with ramrod-straight posture, surrounded by three other women who alternated between shooting concerned glances at Layla and nodding in apparent approval at the manager's intervention. Their children had stopped eating, wide-eyed at the unfolding drama. Sarah Anderson, recognizing the signs of impending conflict, quickly tried to redirect attention back to the celebration. "Emily, sweetheart, make your wish." She encouraged, but her daughter remained frozen, the candles dripping wax onto the frosting as she watched the interaction between her beloved uncle and the manager. "Whatever needs to be said can be said here," Davin replied quietly, his hand finding comfort in Layla's fur. Years of military service had taught him the importance of maintaining position when under pressure. "My service dog and I are a package deal." The restaurant had grown unnaturally quiet, save for the persistent electronic beeping of arcade games. Even Jenny, the sympathetic waitress, hovered uncertainly by the service station, her order pad clutched tightly to her chest. The air felt heavy with tension, like the moments before an incoming mortar strike, a feeling Davin knew all too well. Martinez cleared her throat, glancing nervously between Davin and Karen Mitchell's table. "Sir, we've received some concerns from other patrons about the presence of your companion. While we respect your situation, we need to consider the comfort and safety of all our guests." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Emily's birthday cake continued to burn bright, its candles now the only movement in their corner of the restaurant, as everyone waited to see how the decorated veteran would respond to this challenge to his dignity. Sarah Martinez shifted her weight uncomfortably, conscious of the dozens of eyes now fixed on this unfolding scene. "Mr. Doomer, perhaps I wasn't clear enough. Several customers have expressed serious concerns about having a large German Shepherd in our dining area. They're worried about their children's safety." Davin reached into his pocket with deliberate slowness, withdrawing his service dog documentation, his military training evident in his measured response. "Ma'am, Layla is a certified service animal. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, she has every legal right to be here." His voice remained steady, though his knuckles whitened around the laminated card. Karen Mitchell chose this moment to approach, her heels clicking against the tile floor like a metronome counting down to confrontation. "I don't mean to intrude," she began, though her posture suggested otherwise, "but my grandson is terrified of large dogs. Surely you understand our concern? There must be some accommodation that can be made." Emily, still perched before her melting birthday cake, suddenly spoke up. But Layla's not scary. She helps Uncle David when his leg hurts, just like Daddy's friends helped him in the war. Her voice cracked with emotion, drawing a sharp intake of breath from Karen Mitchell. The manager's face paled slightly at the mention of war service, but she pressed on, now caught between corporate policy and mounting customer pressure. "Sir, could you perhaps explain why you need the dog? It would help us better understand the situation." The request hung in the air like a loaded weapon. David felt his combat training kick in, the same instincts that had kept him alive through 3 tours now screaming at him to maintain his composure. "My medical history is private," he stated firmly. "The law doesn't require me to disclose my specific disabilities." Sarah Anderson stood up, her chair scraping backwards. "This is ridiculous. We're celebrating my daughter's birthday, and David is our honored guest. He lost his leg serving our country." At this revelation, Karen Mitchell's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flash of something recognition. Regret? Crossing her features before she could mask it. The other diners began murmuring amongst themselves, the room dividing into clear factions, those who supported the veterans' rights and those who sided with the concerned parents. Martinez looked increasingly trapped between her duty to respond to customer complaints and the growing realization that she might be on the wrong side of both law and morality. "Perhaps we could move your party to our private dining room," she suggested weakly, knowing even as she spoke that this compromise solution would satisfy no one. Emily's birthday candles had burned down to stubs, their flames flickering in the tensioned, thick air. Layla remained perfectly still against David's leg, her training impeccable even as the situation deteriorated around them. The German shepherd's eyes never left her handler, ready to respond to the slightest sign of distress. The atmosphere in Jeepers restaurant reached a breaking point as other diners began taking sides in the unfolding confrontation. The birthday candles on Emily's cake had burned down completely, leaving trails of wax across the festive frosting, an unintentional metaphor for how quickly the celebration had melted into crisis. Martinez, the manager, found herself caught between corporate policy and mounting public pressure as several veterans from nearby tables stood up, their military bearing evident as they moved to stand near David in silent support. One of them, an elderly man wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, addressed the room. This man lost his leg defending the very rights being denied to him today. Karen Mitchell's demeanor shifted subtly as she noticed the prosthetic leg, her earlier confidence wavering. The mention of military service appeared to trigger something deep within her, though she maintained her position about customer comfort. Other parents began gathering their children, creating an unsettling shuffle of movement throughout the restaurant. Emily, still perched before her melted candles, broke the tension with a sob that cut through the confrontational atmosphere. "Uncle David promised Daddy he'd never miss my birthday," she cried, her words carrying devastating weight across the now silent restaurant. Sarah Anderson pulled her daughter close, tears streaming down her own face as she watched the man who had kept his promise to her fallen husband being forced to choose between his dignity and his commitment. Layla remained perfectly still throughout the escalation, her training evident in her steady focus on David's increasing distress. The German shepherd's calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them, serving as a visible reminder of the very reason service dogs were essential to veterans' well-being. The situation reached its climax when David slowly rose from his chair, his military discipline evident in his controlled movements. "Emily," he said softly, his voice carrying in the tense silence, "sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from a fight." With perfect composure, he reached for his cane, while Layla shifted smoothly to provide support on his weak side. The restaurant fell completely silent as the decorated veteran made his way toward the exit, his dignity intact but his heart visibly broken. Within hours of the incident at Jeepers restaurant, Sterling Heights found itself at the center of a moral firestorm. The local Facebook community group, Sterling Heights Neighbors, exploded with activity as witnesses shared their versions of events. Jennifer Baker, a mother of 2 who had been seated near Emily's party, posted a detailed account that quickly garnered hundreds of shares. "Today I witnessed something that shook my faith in our community. A decorated veteran was humiliated at a child's birthday party simply because his service dog made some people uncomfortable. The dog was better behaved than most children I've seen in restaurants." The Sterling Heights Gazette picked up the story for their morning edition, with Veteran Affairs reporter Thomas Wilson crafting a balanced but pointed headline. Local restaurant faces backlash over service dog dispute, where do rights end and comfort begin? The article included interviews with legal experts who emphasized the clear protections provided by the Americans with Disabilities Act. At the Sterling Heights Community Center, the weekly town council meeting transformed into an impromptu forum on disability rights. Mayor Robert Harrison, himself a Vietnam veteran, opened the session with a stern reminder our community was built by veterans who fought for the very freedoms we're discussing today. The business community found itself divided. James McKenzie, president of the Sterling Heights Chamber of Commerce, issued a carefully worded statement calling for sensitivity training for all local businesses. However, some restaurant owners privately expressed sympathy for Jeepers' position, citing their own struggles with balancing diverse customer needs. Local veterans organizations mobilized quickly. The American Legion Post 326 announced an immediate boycott of Jeepers, while the VFW began organizing a fundraiser to support service dog awareness programs. Commander Richard Powell, speaking from the VFW Hall, emphasized the broader implications. This isn't just about one veteran and his service dog. This is about how we treat those who sacrificed everything for our country. Meanwhile, at Sterling Heights High School, where both David and Michael had once been star athletes, the incident became a teaching moment. Ms. Patricia O'Brien, the social studies teacher, incorporated the event into her civic rights lesson, leading to passionate discussions about the intersection of personal comfort and civil rights. The local incident at Jeepers restaurant rapidly evolved into a national conversation about veterans' rights when Detroit news reporter Catherine Palmer's initial coverage went viral. Her evening news segment, featuring security camera footage of Emily's tearful face and Davin's dignified exit, struck a chord that resonated far beyond Michigan's borders. Major networks picked up the story, each offering their own angle. The Morning America show secured an exclusive interview with Sarah Anderson, who spoke eloquently about her late husband's sacrifice and Davin's unwavering commitment to their family. Michael and Davin served together, bled together, she explained, her composure breaking slightly. Now my daughter watches as her father's best friend, her Uncle Davin, faces discrimination at her own birthday party. Social media amplified the story's reach exponentially. The hashtag #StandWithDavin began trending nationally, with veterans organizations across the country sharing their own experiences of discrimination. A TikTok video of Emily explaining how Layla helps her Uncle Davin be brave garnered millions of views, humanizing the issue in a way that statistics and legal arguments never could. Conservative news outlets focused on property rights and business autonomy, while progressive media emphasized civil rights and veteran support. The Detroit Free Press ran a comprehensive piece titled "The Battle After the War: America's Treatment of Disabled Veterans," featuring interviews with disability rights advocates and business owners struggling to balance competing interests. Local news station WXYZ dispatched veteran reporter Michael Stevens to investigate the broader implications. His three-part series, Service, Sacrifice, and Civil Rights, revealed a pattern of similar incidents across the state, transforming Davin's experience into a catalyst for broader social change. The media scrutiny intensified when an anonymous source leaked Karen Mitchell's connection to the military community, though the exact nature of this connection remained unclear. Speculation ran rampant, with some suggesting she had her own painful history with service dogs, while others hinted at a deeper, more personal connection to the story. Jeepers' corporate office found itself overwhelmed by the media onslaught. Their initial statement, a carefully worded apology citing a misunderstanding of service animal regulations, only fueled further debate. Public relations experts criticized their response as tone-deaf, particularly given the emotional resonance of a veteran being asked to leave a fallen comrade's daughter's birthday celebration. The incident at Jeepers restaurant quickly attracted the attention of prominent civil rights attorneys. Margaret Whitman, a respected disability rights lawyer from the Michigan Advocacy Center, initiated a thorough review of the case. The Americans with Disabilities Act is unambiguous about service animal accommodation, she stated in her preliminary findings. What occurred at Jeepers represents a clear violation of federal law. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division launched an investigation into the incident, focusing not only on the specific event, but also using it as a case study for broader compliance issues in public accommodations. Special Counsel Robert Freeman emphasized the significance. This case highlights the ongoing challenges faced by disabled veterans in civilian spaces. The Sterling Heights Chamber of Commerce responded by organizing mandatory training sessions for all member businesses. Legal experts from the National Veterans Legal Services Program conducted workshops explaining service animal regulations, public accommodation requirements, and proper protocols for verifying service animal status. Insurance companies representing Jeepers began negotiations with Davin's legal team, led by Vietnam veteran and civil rights attorney James Harrison. However, Davin made it clear through his representatives that his primary interest wasn't monetary compensation. This was never about money, his statement read. It's about ensuring no other veteran faces similar discrimination. The Michigan Restaurant Association issued updated guidelines for all member establishments specifically addressing service animal accommodations. They developed a comprehensive training program using security footage from the Jeepers incident with all parties' permission as a teaching tool for what not to do in similar situations. Local disability advocacy groups seized the momentum to push for stronger enforcement of existing regulations. The Michigan Disability Rights Coalition launched a Know Your Rights campaign, distributing informational materials to both businesses and disabled veterans. They established a hotline for reporting similar incidents and offering legal guidance. The legal ramifications extended beyond just service animal accommodations. The incident sparked a broader examination of veteran accessibility issues in public spaces. State legislators began drafting amendments to strengthen Michigan's disability rights laws with specific provisions addressing veteran service animals. The Saturday morning protest outside Jeepers restaurant began quietly but grew into something unprecedented for Sterling Heights. Veterans from across Michigan, many accompanied by their service dogs, formed a dignified line along the sidewalk. They stood at parade rest, their military bearing evident despite varying degrees of disability, creating a powerful visual statement without saying a word. Commander Richard Powell of VFW Post 326 orchestrated the demonstration with military precision. "We're not here to shut down a business," he addressed the growing crowd, his voice steady and clear. "We're here to educate and remind our community that the rights we fought to protect include our own." The scene became more poignant when local first responders began arriving. Off-duty police officers and firefighters, many of them veterans themselves, joined the line. Officer James Sullivan, a former Marine, brought his K-9 partner in a symbolic gesture of solidarity. Service dogs, whether they assist law enforcement or veterans, deserve respect and recognition, he stated to the assembled media. The protest took an unexpected turn when Sarah Anderson arrived with Emily. The 7-year-old carried a handmade sign reading, "My daddy's best friend is my hero too." The crowd parted silently, creating a path for them to join the front line. Emily's presence transformed the atmosphere from one of confrontation to something more profound, a lesson in empathy and understanding. Local businesses along the strip mall responded to the gathering. The coffee shop next door began distributing free coffee to the veterans, while the bookstore offered their restrooms and a rest area for those who needed it. Even some of Jeepers' regular customers, arriving for birthday parties only to find the situation, chose to join the protest instead. The demonstration reached its first critical moment when Karen Mitchell's car pulled into the parking lot. She sat behind the wheel for several long minutes, watching the scene unfold through her windshield. The woman who had initiated the complaint that sparked this controversy was now faced with the full weight of its consequences. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she appeared to struggle with a decision that would soon add another surprising layer to this unfolding story. Karen Mitchell finally emerged from her vehicle, her composure noticeably different from the confident woman who had complained at Jeepers days earlier. As she approached the protest line, her expensive beige suit seemed out of place among the veterans' casual attire and service uniforms. The crowd fell silent, tension mounting in the morning air. Commander Powell stepped forward to intercept her, but Sarah Anderson reached her first. "Mrs. Mitchell," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the hushed parking lot, "I believe you have something to say to my daughter's uncle." Emily clutched her mother's hand, her sign lowered but still visible. Karen's carefully maintained facade cracked as she faced the assembled veterans. "I'm Michael Anderson's mother," she announced, her voice trembling. The revelation sent a ripple through the crowd. "The same Michael who served with Sergeant Dumar, the same Michael who didn't come home." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. David, who had been standing quietly with Layla at the edge of the gathering, stepped forward. His prosthetic leg caught the morning sunlight as he moved. Karen's eyes fixed on Layla, then shifted to the German Shepherd's service vest, identical to the type her son had described in his last letter home. "Michael wrote to me about you," she continued, addressing David directly. "He told me how you saved 4 men in your unit." Before she paused, composing herself. "But when I saw your dog, all I could think about was the German Shepherd that found my son's unit that day. The military dog that died trying to warn him." Her voice broke completely. The revelation transformed the atmosphere of the protest. Veterans in the crowd exchanged knowing looks, understanding how trauma could manifest in unexpected ways. Emily, comprehending that this was her other grandmother, the one she rarely saw, stepped forward with the innocent wisdom of a child. "Daddy's dog was a hero too," Emily said softly, reaching for Karen's hand. "Just like Layla helps Uncle David be brave now." The simple statement bridged a gap that legal arguments and protests couldn't breach. Karen Mitchell knelt to embrace her granddaughter, tears falling freely now. David signaled Layla to approach, her training allowing her to move slowly and non-threateningly. "Michael would want us to heal together," he said quietly, extending his hand to Karen. "That's what he always fought for, not just freedom but understanding." The emotional scene outside Jeepers took another dramatic turn when Sarah Martinez, the restaurant manager, emerged from the building. She walked purposefully toward the gathered crowd, her manager's badge removed, carrying what appeared to be an old photograph in her trembling hands. "I need to tell you something," she announced, her voice carrying across the now silent parking lot. "I was a trauma nurse at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany." She turned to face David directly. "I was there the night they brought your unit in from Afghanistan. I helped stabilize you before your transfer to Walter Reed." The revelation created a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Martinez continued, her professional demeanor cracking. "I should have recognized you, should have remembered what service dogs mean to our wounded warriors. But I let corporate policy and customer complaints override my own experience." She held out the photograph, a younger version of herself in medical scrubs, standing beside a military working dog and its handler. This was taken 2 days before that same dog sacrificed himself, saving an entire patrol. "Mrs. Mitchell, your son wrote about that dog in the military newspaper. I kept the article all these years." Karen Mitchell reached for the photograph, her hands shaking. "I remember this article," she whispered. "Michael sent me a copy. He said that dog made him feel safe, knowing they had angels with 4 legs watching over them." Commander Powell stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "This isn't just about service dogs or regulations," he declared. "This is about understanding that the wounds of war touch all of us differently. Some scars are visible." He gestured to David's prosthetic leg, "Others hide deeper." Emily, still holding both her grandmother's and mother's hands, looked up at Layla with newfound understanding. "That's why Uncle David needs Layla," she said with childlike clarity. "She helps heal the scars we can't see." The gathered crowd witnessed something powerful transforming before them, not just a resolution to a conflict, but the beginning of a deeper healing. Veterans, family members, and community leaders alike recognized that this moment represented something larger than a dispute over service dog access. Sarah Martinez withdrew an envelope from her pocket. "This is my resignation letter," she began, but David raised his hand to stop her. "No," he said firmly. "What we need isn't fewer people who understand. What we need is more education, more understanding." He looked around at the assembled crowd. "This is an opportunity to make real change." In the days following the protest, David Dumar struggled with the resurgence of memories he'd worked years to process. The quiet moments in his apartment became the hardest, filled with echoes of explosions and the phantom pain that intensified with emotional stress. Layla remained extraordinarily vigilant during these days, rarely leaving his side even to rest. The revelation of Karen Mitchell's connection to Michael had reopened wounds David thought long healed. Each night he found himself reviewing old photographs, reading through letters Michael had sent home, seeing his friend's features reflected in Emily's smile. The weight of his promise to Michael felt heavier now, complicated by this unexpected connection to Mrs. Mitchell's trauma. His therapist at the VA Medical Center noted concerning changes in his behavior. Davin had begun avoiding public spaces again, ordering groceries for delivery rather than facing potential confrontations. The progress of years of rehabilitation seemed to waver as hypervigilance and anxiety resurfaced. Only his commitment to Emily's weekly visits kept him from completely withdrawing. During one particularly difficult evening, Davin received an unexpected call from Commander Powell, son. The older veteran said, "I know that 1,000-yard stare is back, but remember, you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for every veteran who needs their service dog, for every family trying to understand, for little Emily who sees you as her hero." The local media's constant attention had transformed Davin's private struggle into a public spectacle. Reporters camped outside his apartment complex, seeking comments about the service dog scandal, as they dubbed it. Their presence triggered memories of combat photography, of cameras documenting the aftermath of the ambush that took his leg and his best friend. Sarah Anderson noticed the toll it was taking. During Emily's weekly visit, she found Davin more withdrawn, his responses delayed, his hands constantly seeking comfort in Layla's fur. The German Shepherd had begun displaying increased protective behaviors, positioning herself between Davin and unexpected noises or movements. The ripple effects of the Jeepers incident created deep fissures within Sterling Heights' typically close-knit community. Local business owners found themselves caught in an increasingly polarized debate, forced to publicly declare their positions on service animal accommodation or face potential boycotts from both sides. The Sterling Heights Chamber of Commerce reported that several businesses experienced significant revenue declines as customers chose establishments based on their stance regarding the incident. The Pizza Palace, which had immediately posted service animals welcome signs and offered free meals to veterans, saw their business increase, while those remaining silent faced public scrutiny and criticism. The situation intensified when anonymous flyers appeared around the Lakeside Mall, detailing alleged previous incidents of discrimination at various establishments. These unverified claims created an atmosphere of suspicion and defensiveness among business owners. The mall management found itself mediating disputes between tenants who disagreed on appropriate responses to the controversy. Sterling Heights High School, where both Davin and Michael had once been celebrated athletes, became another flashpoint. The school board meeting erupted into heated debate when discussing a proposed mandatory curriculum about disability rights and veteran affairs. Parents argued passionately about appropriate ways to address the incident with their children. The community's religious leaders attempted to bridge the growing divide. Reverend Thomas Matthews of First Presbyterian Church dedicated his Sunday sermon to compassion and understanding, while Rabbi David Cohen organized an interfaith dialogue about community healing. However, these well-intentioned efforts sometimes highlighted the deep-seated disagreements within the community. Local law enforcement reported an increase in calls regarding service animals as hypervigilant citizens began questioning the legitimacy of every service dog they encountered. The police department issued a statement requesting the public to refrain from confronting individuals with service animals, but the atmosphere of suspicion persisted. The incident affected property values in the commercial district near Jeepers, with several businesses putting their locations up for sale. Real estate agents reported that potential buyers expressed concerns about the area's stability and community relations. The economic impact on Jeepers Restaurant manifested swiftly and severely. Within 3 weeks of the incident, their revenue dropped by 60%. Birthday party bookings, their primary source of income, declined dramatically as parents chose alternative venues for their celebrations. The restaurant's signature weekend waiting lines disappeared, replaced by empty tables and a skeleton staff. Corporate headquarters dispatched their crisis management team to assess the situation. Their internal audit revealed deeper institutional problems, outdated staff training protocols, inconsistent service animal policies across locations, and a concerning pattern of similar, though unreported, incidents at other franchises. The findings prompted an emergency board meeting in Chicago. The immediate financial hemorrhage forced difficult decisions. Management reduced operating hours, leading to layoff notices for 12 part-time employees. Sarah Martinez, despite Davin's intervention, submitted her resignation, citing the emotional toll of the situation. Her departure triggered an exodus of experienced staff members, further compromising the restaurant's ability to maintain quality service. The ripple effect extended throughout the Lakeside Mall. Adjacent businesses reported decreased foot traffic as families actively avoided the Jeepers section of the complex. The mall management found themselves fielding concerned calls from other tenants about lease obligations and traffic guarantees. Several stores began negotiations for early lease terminations, citing the material change in business environment. Insurance costs for local restaurants skyrocketed as carriers reassessed their liability coverage for service animal-related incidents. The Michigan Restaurant Association reported that their members face premium increases averaging 30% at renewal, with some carriers introducing specific exclusions for service animal discrimination claims. Jeepers' parent company faced additional challenges beyond the local market. Franchise inquiries dropped to zero in the quarter following the incident, while existing franchisees demanded corporate support for rebranding efforts to distance themselves from the controversy. The company's stock price declined 15% as investors questioned their risk management practices. The local Chamber of Commerce commissioned an economic impact study, revealing that the incident had created an estimated $2.3 million reduction in local business activity. This figure included direct losses at Jeepers, reduced mall traffic, canceled events, and associated decreases in auxiliary services such as local transportation and supply chain partners. At the emergency town hall meeting called to address the ongoing crisis, Sarah Martinez took the podium, her hands trembling as she unfolded a worn military document. The assembled community leaders, business owners, and concerned citizens fell silent as she began to speak. What many of you don't know, she began, her voice steady despite her visible emotion, is that before becoming Jeepers' manager, I served as a trauma nurse with the 31st Combat Support Hospital. For 18 months, I worked in the critical care unit at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where we received our most severely wounded warriors from Afghanistan and Iraq. Martinez proceeded to share a detailed account of the night Davin's unit arrived. She described the chaos of the emergency room, the desperate efforts to stabilize multiple casualties, and her vivid memory of a young soldier who kept asking about his service dog even while fighting for his own life. That soldier, she revealed, was Michael Anderson. I was there when Michael spoke his last words, Martinez continued, her professional composure finally breaking. He made me promise to ensure his daughter would always know he died protecting his brothers in arms. What I didn't realize until now was that Emily's birthday party would bring me face to face with Sergeant Dumar, one of the men Michael died saving. The revelation transformed the atmosphere in the town hall. Martinez explained how the corporate pressure to maintain customer satisfaction had caused her to suppress her military experience and better judgment. I betrayed not only my training as a medical professional but also my oath as a service member. In trying to appease a few uncomfortable customers, I forgot the debt we owed to those who sacrificed everything. Commander Powell, who had been standing at the back of the room, stepped forward to address the gathering. Sometimes the hardest battles our veterans face aren't on the battlefield, he stated, but in trying to navigate a civilian world that doesn't understand their invisible wounds. Sarah's story reminds us that even those meant to help can become paralyzed by bureaucracy and fear. During a private meeting organized by Commander Powell at the VFW Hall, Karen Mitchell finally shared her complete story with Davin and Sarah Anderson. The small room, filled with military memorabilia, provided an intimate setting for a conversation long overdue. Michael was my only child, Karen began, her fingers tracing the outline of a photograph showing her son in full military dress. When he was deployed, I found comfort in his letters describing the military working dogs that protected their unit. He wrote about how these German shepherds could sense danger before anyone else, how they saved countless lives. She revealed that her last communication with Michael had been about a military dog named Zeus. The German shepherd had detected an IED that would have killed Michael's entire squad. In his final letter, Michael wrote that if anything happened to him, he knew his brothers in arms and their service dogs would carry on his mission of protecting others. Karen's voice trembled as she explained how the sight of Layla at Emily's birthday party had triggered overwhelming memories. When I saw another German shepherd in that restaurant, all I could think about was Zeus, who died trying to save my son's unit in that final ambush. The same ambush where she looked at Davin's prosthetic leg, unable to complete the sentence. Sarah Anderson, who had remained silent, reached across the table to take Karen's hand. "Michael would want us to find healing together," she said softly. "He always believed that understanding could bridge any divide." Davin, with Layla lying quietly at his feet, shared his own perspective. "Your son saved my life twice," he stated. "Once in combat and again by making me promise to be there for Emily. That promise and Layla's support gave me purpose when I was lost in darkness after returning home." Karen then revealed a final, heartbreaking detail. She had been volunteering at the VA hospital helping veterans with therapy dogs but had been unable to face German Shepherds. "I've been fighting my own battle with PTSD," she admitted. "Seeing Layla forced me to confront fears I'd been avoiding for years." At Emily Anderson's rescheduled birthday celebration held in the VFW Hall's main room, a remarkable moment of healing unfolded through the wisdom of a 7-year-old. The gathering included not only family and friends, but also Sarah Martinez, Karen Mitchell, and representatives from Jeepers Restaurant's corporate office. Emily, wearing her favorite blue dress with stars and stripes, stood before the assembled guests with unexpected poise. "I want to tell everyone about my 2 heroes," she announced, her clear voice carrying across the quiet room. "My daddy, who watches over me from heaven, and my Uncle Davin, who keeps Daddy's promise to always be here." She then did something extraordinary. Taking both Karen Mitchell's and Davin's hands, she led them to where Layla lay quietly observing the proceedings. "Grandma Karen," Emily said, "Daddy wrote to me too. He said that angels sometimes have 4 legs and fur. Layla is Uncle Davin's angel, just like Zeus was Daddy's angel." The profound simplicity of Emily's words resonated deeply with everyone present. The corporate representatives, who had arrived prepared to discuss legal settlements and policy changes, found themselves witness to a more meaningful resolution. Emily continued, retrieving her birthday wish list from her mother. "I didn't blow out my candles at Jeepers," she explained, "because my wish wasn't ready yet. But now I know what I want." She looked around the room with determination. "I wish for everyone to understand that service dogs are heroes too. They help heal the hurts we can't see, just like Daddy's letter said." Her innocent wisdom sparked an immediate response. Karen Mitchell, who had been hesitant around Layla, knelt beside the German Shepherd. With gentle encouragement from Emily, she slowly extended her hand. Layla, displaying the impeccable training that had made her an excellent service dog, responded with calm acceptance. The moment transformed the atmosphere from one of formal reconciliation to genuine healing. Sarah Martinez, still in her nurse's uniform from her shift at the VA hospital, observed that sometimes the best medicine comes from the heart of a child. In the months following Emily's birthday celebration at the VFW Hall, Sterling Heights underwent a remarkable transformation in its approach to veterans and service animals. The incident that had initially divided the community became a catalyst for meaningful change, guided by the wisdom of a child's perspective. Jeepers Restaurant, under new leadership, initiated a comprehensive community outreach program. The establishment partnered with the local VA hospital to establish Service Dog Sundays, where veterans and their service animals were welcomed for special events. The program quickly expanded beyond its initial scope, becoming a model for businesses throughout Michigan. Karen Mitchell, finding renewed purpose, established the Michael Anderson Foundation for Veteran Support. The organization focused on educating businesses and community members about service animals and veteran needs. Working alongside Commander Powell, she developed training programs that incorporated her personal journey from fear to understanding, making the message particularly impactful for those who shared similar concerns. Sarah Martinez returned to her medical roots, accepting a position at the VA hospital while maintaining her role as a community educator. Her unique perspective as both a former military nurse and a business manager provided valuable insights for the Foundation's training programs. Her testimony about the night she treated Michael Anderson and Davin became a powerful tool for building empathy and understanding. The Sterling Heights Chamber of Commerce implemented a citywide certification program for veteran-friendly businesses. This initiative, inspired by Emily's birthday wish, required establishments to complete comprehensive training in service animal accommodation and veteran support. The program's success attracted attention from neighboring communities, leading to its adoption across the metropolitan area. Davin Dumar, though initially hesitant to remain in the public eye, found himself embracing a new role as an advocate for veteran rights. With Layla by his side, he began visiting local schools, sharing his story and teaching children about the important role of service animals. His presentations always included Emily's perspective, demonstrating how understanding often comes from the most unexpected sources. The incident at Jeepers Restaurant catalyzed significant institutional changes throughout Sterling Heights and beyond. The City Council, recognizing the need for comprehensive reform, enacted the Service Members Access and Rights Act, establishing clear guidelines for businesses regarding service animal accommodation and veteran support. The legislation, drafted with input from veterans organizations and disability rights advocates, mandated specific training requirements for all commercial establishments. Additionally, it established a certification process requiring businesses to demonstrate their understanding and implementation of service animal policies. The act included provisions for regular compliance audits and meaningful penalties for violations. The Michigan Restaurant Association adopted Sterling Heights model as a statewide standard. Their revised guidelines incorporated lessons learned from the Jeepers incident, emphasizing proactive accommodation rather than reactive compliance. The association developed comprehensive training materials, including video testimonials from Davin, Karen Mitchell, and Sarah Martinez. Educational institutions throughout the district integrated veteran awareness and disability rights into their curricula. Sterling Heights High School, where both Davin and Michael had graduated, instituted an annual service and sacrifice week, featuring presentations from veterans and demonstrations of service animal capabilities. The Lakeside Mall management implemented new tenant requirements incorporating service animal accommodation into lease agreements. They established dedicated quiet areas where service animals and their handlers could rest and installed clear signage throughout the facility explaining service animal rights and protocols. Corporate response extended beyond local initiatives. Major retail and restaurant chains across Michigan revised their training programs to include specific modules on service animal accommodation. These changes reflected a shift from viewing such accommodations as legal obligations to recognizing them as opportunities for community engagement and support. The Michigan State Legislature used Sterling Heights' experience to inform broader policy reforms. The resulting legislation strengthened protections for service animal handlers while providing clear guidelines for businesses seeking to balance diverse customer needs. These changes established Michigan as a leader in veteran support and disability accommodation. 1 year after the incident at Jeepers Restaurant, the principals gathered for Emily's 8th birthday celebration, this time at the newly renovated VFW Hall. The transformation in their relationships reflected a deeper healing that had occurred within the community. Karen Mitchell had undergone a remarkable journey of recovery. Working closely with a VA counselor, she confronted her grief and trauma surrounding her son's loss. Through her work with the Michael Anderson Foundation, she found purpose in helping other military families navigate their own healing journeys. Her relationship with Layla evolved from fear to acceptance, and eventually to genuine affection. She often remarked that helping veterans with service dogs had become her way of honoring Michael's memory. Davin Dumar experienced significant personal growth as well. His role as a veteran advocate helped him process his own trauma and find renewed purpose. The promise he made to Michael evolved from a burden of guilt into a source of strength. His partnership with Layla deepened as they worked together educating the public, their bond serving as a powerful testament to the healing relationship between veterans and their service animals. Sarah Martinez found her true calling in combining her medical background with advocacy work. She developed a specialized program at the VA hospital focusing on the integration of service dogs into veteran rehabilitation. Her first-hand experience with both the medical and business aspects of service animal accommodation made her an invaluable resource for implementing institutional changes. Emily Anderson, whose innocent wisdom had initiated much of this transformation, continued to bridge generational and emotional gaps within the community. Her birthday parties became annual gatherings where veterans, their families, and community leaders celebrated not just another year of her life, but the ongoing journey of understanding and acceptance. The broader impact of their collective growth extended beyond Sterling Heights. Their story became a case study in veteran support and community healing, featured in national publications and academic journals. The personal transformations of those involved demonstrated how confronting painful truths could lead to meaningful reconciliation and positive change. The conclusion of this chapter in their lives was marked not by the end of their journey, but by the beginning of a new mission, ensuring that their experience would continue to inspire understanding and acceptance for veterans and their service animals across the nation. As Emily often said, with the simple clarity of youth, sometimes the best heroes have 4 legs, and the strongest hearts are the ones that learn to love again. In the twilight of our lives, we carry memories of a time when honor, duty, and sacrifice were more than just words, they were the foundation of our nation. Today's story reminds us that the wounds of war extend far beyond the battlefield, touching mothers who lost sons, children who lost fathers, and veterans who carry both visible and invisible scars. Yet, in Sterling Heights, we witnessed how a child's pure heart and a service dog's unwavering loyalty could heal wounds that time alone could not mend. When we see a veteran with their service dog, we're not just seeing a person with an animal, we're seeing a sacred bond forged through trauma and recovery, a living testament to the cost of our freedom. Like Karen Mitchell, many of us carry hidden grief from Vietnam, Korea, or more recent conflicts. Like Davin, our children and grandchildren who served in Iraq and Afghanistan battled demons we cannot see. Their service dogs are not just pets, they are lifelines, guardians, and symbols of hope. As we enter our golden years, let us be the generation that bridges understanding, that teaches our grandchildren about sacrifice, and that ensures no veteran ever feels unwelcome in the country they defended. After all, the measure of our society lies not in how we honor our heroes during wartime, but in how we embrace them when they return home. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video. The metallic taste of blood filled Staff Sergeant James Anderson's mouth as he pressed his trembling hands against Leica's wound. The German Shepherd's black and tan fur was matted with crimson, her breathing shallow and labored. Time seemed to freeze in that bombed-out building in eastern Afghanistan. "Stay with me, girl. Please stay with me," he whispered, his voice cracking. Just moments ago, she had lunged forward, intercepting the insurgent who had emerged from the shadows. The sound of gunfire still echoed through the concrete corridors. Through the chaos, James couldn't shake the haunting reality. He had ordered Leica into this building. Now her warm blood was seeping through his fingers, each heartbeat pushing out more of her life force. Around them, his team secured the perimeter, but all he could focus on was her fading brown eyes, still fixed on him with unwavering loyalty. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Staff Sergeant James Jimmy Anderson never imagined his life would become intertwined with a military working dog. Growing up in small-town Nebraska, he was the golden boy who led his high school football team to state championships 3 years running. His father and grandfather, both decorated veterans, had shaped his destiny long before he enlisted, their medals displayed proudly in the family's modest living room. At 35, James carried their legacy with quiet dignity. His weathered face and steady hands told the story of 4 deployments, but his eyes still held the same determination that had caught Sarah's attention at a hometown fundraiser 5 years ago. Sarah, a third-grade teacher with an infectious laugh and unlimited patience, had given him not just stability but also their greatest blessing, Tommy, their 1-year-old son who had his mother's curls and his father's stubborn chin. Leica entered their story as more than just a military working dog. At 6 years old, she had already earned a reputation among the handlers for her exceptional ability to detect threats and protect her team. Her file listed numerous successful missions, but it was her eyes that told the deeper story, intelligent, watchful, and carrying shadows of past operations that had left invisible scars. The bond between handler and dog wasn't immediate. James had initially approached their partnership with professional distance, mindful of Colonel Frank Thompson's repeated warnings about emotional attachment to military assets. Thompson, a stern-faced veteran of multiple conflicts, represented the old guard's perspective on military working dogs, tools to be utilized, not soldiers to be honored. Linda Martinez, the base's senior dog trainer, saw things differently. Over 15 years of working with military dogs, she had witnessed countless examples of their dedication and intelligence. She recognized something special in Leica's connection with James, a mutual understanding that transcended traditional handler-canine relationships. Dr. Michael Reed, the local veterinarian who occasionally consulted for the military, would later play a crucial role in their story. His civilian perspective and innovative approach to treating combat-injured dogs would challenge military protocols and change lives in ways none of them could have predicted. This unlikely collection of lives, a dedicated soldier, a loyal dog, and the people around them, was about to be tested in ways that would question everything they believed about loyalty, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds formed in the crucible of war. The pre-dawn briefing room hummed with tension as Staff Sergeant James Anderson studied the grainy surveillance photos spread across the wooden table. Colonel Thompson's voice cut through the silence, each word carrying the weight of countless similar briefings that had ended in both triumph and tragedy. "Intelligence confirms high-value targets have taken refuge in this compound," Thompson said, his finger tracing the outline of a 3-story concrete structure. "Local assets report increased activity in the past 48 hours. This is our window, gentlemen." James felt Leica shift against his leg, her muscular frame taut with anticipation. After 3 years of working together, she could read the room's energy as clearly as any soldier. Lieutenant Parker, their team leader, leaned forward, his coffee untouched and growing cold. "Sir, the building's layout presents significant challenges," Parker noted, his voice measured. "Multiple blind corners, underground sections unaccounted for in the blueprints. We're looking at optimal conditions for ambush points." James watched Martinez standing quietly in the corner, her arms crossed. As their senior dog trainer, she had spent the previous evening working with Leica on close-quarters detection scenarios. Her subtle nod told him what he needed to know. Leica was ready, but the mission carried extraordinary risks. "That's precisely why we're deploying with Anderson and Leica," Thompson replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Our K9 unit has the highest success rate in the region. Time is critical. We move in 3 hours." The briefing continued with mechanical precision, entry points, contingency plans, emergency protocols. But James's attention kept returning to the building schematic. Something about the layout nagged at him, a detail that didn't quite align with their intelligence. He had learned to trust these instincts, the same ones that had kept his team alive through countless operations. Sir James spoke up, his finger hovering over the blueprint's eastern section. "These utility tunnels, they're unusually extensive for a building of this size, could indicate." "Your concerns are noted," Sergeant Thompson interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "But this operation has been vetted at the highest levels. We have actionable intelligence that won't wait for perfect conditions." The room fell silent. James felt the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. Leica, sensing his unease, pressed closer against his leg. Her presence had always been his anchor, a reminder that in the chaos of combat, their partnership had never failed. As the briefing concluded, Martinez approached James, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "Trust your gut, Anderson, and trust your dog. Leica's not just equipment, no matter what the colonel says. She's your partner, and she's never been wrong." James knelt beside Leica, running his hand along her sleek fur. Her brown eyes met his, filled with an understanding that transcended words. In 3 hours, they would enter that building facing whatever waited in those shadowy corridors. The success of the mission and the lives of his team would depend on their bond. What he couldn't know then was that this mission would test that bond in ways he never imagined. As he left the briefing room, the morning sun just beginning to paint the sky, James took a moment to send a quick text to Sarah. "Mission today. Kiss Tommy for me. I love you both." The weight of his wedding ring felt particularly heavy that morning, a reminder of everything he had to lose and everything he fought to protect. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the compound as James and his team took their positions. The air hung heavy with dust and anticipation, the silence broken only by the soft crackle of radio communications. Leica's breathing remained steady beside him, her muscles coiled with controlled energy. "Alpha team in position," Lieutenant Parker's voice whispered through the comm. "Standing by for entry." James performed one final equipment check, his hands moving with practiced precision. The weight of his previous misgivings about the mission pressed against him like the ceramic plates in his vest. He glanced at Leica, her alert eyes fixed on the building's entrance, ears twitching at frequencies only she could detect. "Bravo team, confirm position," Colonel Thompson's voice crackled through their earpieces from the command center 2 miles away. The response came immediately, each element of their operation clicking into place like pieces of a deadly puzzle. "Command, this is Anderson. Request permission to conduct preliminary sweep with Leica before full team entry. James kept his voice level, professional, though his instincts screamed that something wasn't right about the building's east wing. A pause stretched through the comm channel. Negative, Sergeant. Intel suggests time-sensitive elements. Proceed with simultaneous entry as planned. Thompson's response carried a note of finality that James had learned not to challenge. Lieutenant Parker caught James's eye, a silent question in his gaze. They had served together long enough to read each other's concerns without words. James gave a slight nod they would follow orders, but with elevated caution. All teams, execute on my mark. Parker commanded. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The breach was textbook perfection. Teams flowed through entry points like water finding its path, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. Leica moved slightly ahead of James, her nose working constantly, leading them through the dim corridors. The first floor cleared without incident, increasing the tension rather than relieving it. They reached the junction leading to the east wing. Leica's behavior shifted subtly, a slight hesitation in her step, a barely perceptible change in her breathing pattern. James had learned to read these signals like a second language. Hold, he whispered into his comm. Leica's picking up something. Maintain forward progress. Sergeant Thompson's voice cut through. We don't have time for. The rest of his words were lost as Leica suddenly stiffened, her ears forward, a low growl rumbling in her chest. James had never seen her react this way, not in 3 years of operations. All teams, hold position, he commanded, protocol momentarily forgotten in the face of his dog's warning. Something's not. A metallic click echoed through the corridor. Leica's head snapped toward the sound, her body tensing. In that fraction of a second, James saw everything with crystalline clarity: the almost invisible tripwire at ankle height, the subtle irregularities in the wall plaster that suggested hidden threats, and most importantly, the absolute certainty in Leica's posture that they were in immediate danger. Back, he shouted into the comm. Everyone by? The world exploded into chaos. Time fractured into heartbeats. The initial explosion sent debris cascading through the corridor, but it was what followed that turned James's blood to ice. Through the settling dust and chaos, multiple armed figures emerged from concealed positions, their weapons already tracking toward the exposed members of his team. In that eternal split second, James registered Lieutenant Parker down, possibly wounded. 2 other team members were scrambling for cover, caught in the fatal funnel of the hallway. His training screamed at him to find cover, to return fire, to do something, anything to protect his men. But Leica was already moving. Before James could issue a command, she launched herself forward with explosive power. Her powerful body became a blur of black and tan fur, intercepting the first attacker with devastating precision. The sound of her impact mixed with the shooter's cry of surprise, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. Contact left. Contact left, James shouted into his comm, finally finding his voice. He moved to provide covering fire, but Leica was already pivoting toward the second threat. Her speed and ferocity seemed to multiply her presence, making it impossible for the ambushers to track their targets effectively. Then came the sound that would haunt James's dreams for years to come: 3 sharp cracks of gunfire, followed by Leica's yelp of pain. But even as the bullets found their mark, she maintained her grip on the attacker's arm, giving Parker and the others the precious seconds they needed to regain the tactical advantage. Man down. K9 down, the words tore from James's throat as he finally reached a position to engage. The firefight that followed was brutal and swift, but his focus kept returning to the dark pool spreading beneath Leica's still form. When the last echo of gunfire faded, when the all-clear was finally called, James found himself kneeling beside his partner. Her brown eyes, usually so alert and focused, were clouded with pain but still fixed on him. Her tail, despite everything, managed a weak thump against the blood-stained concrete. "Stay with me, girl," he whispered, applying pressure to the worst of her wounds. "That's an order, you hear me? Stay with me." Lieutenant Parker, sporting a nasty gash on his forehead, was already calling for immediate evacuation. "Command, we need immediate MEDIAC K9 unit critically wounded in action. Multiple GSWs." The rest of the radio traffic faded into background noise as James focused on Leica's increasingly labored breathing. This faithful creature had just saved his entire team, had willingly thrown herself into harm's way without hesitation. And she had done it not because of training or orders, but because of something far more fundamental, the unshakable bond between a dog and her handler. "You're going to make it," he promised her, his voice thick with emotion. "You hear me, Leica? We're going home together. Tommy's waiting to see you. Remember Tommy, he needs his guardian angel." As if understanding, Leica's eyes seemed to brighten slightly at the mention of James's son. Their connection had always transcended the normal boundaries between military working dog and handler. Now, with her life literally slipping through his fingers, James made a silent vow. If she survived this, when she survived this, he would move heaven and earth to keep her by his side. No more missions, no more risks. She had given enough. The distant sound of approaching helicopters cut through the chaos. Help was coming. But as James cradled Leica's head in his lap, whispering encouragement and prayers, he knew that nothing would ever be the same after this day. The military hospital corridor buzzed with controlled chaos. James sat outside the veterinary surgical unit, his uniform still caked with dried blood, Leica's blood. Through the small observation window, he could see Dr. Michael Reed working with intense concentration, his surgical team moving with practiced precision around the operating table where Leica lay motionless. Sergeant Anderson, a soft voice broke through his vigil. He looked up to find Sarah standing there, Tommy balanced on her hip. Her eyes widened at the sight of his blood-stained uniform, but she kept her composure. Tommy, innocent to the gravity of the situation, reached for his father with chubby hands. "I came as soon as I got your message," Sarah said, settling beside him. She didn't mention that she'd driven 3 hours to reach the military hospital, or that she'd left her classroom mid-lesson. Some things didn't need to be said. The surgical suite's door swung open and Colonel Thompson strode out, his face set in its usual stern line. "Sergeant, we need to discuss the incident report and the disposition of the K-9 unit." James felt his jaw tighten. "With all due respect, sir, I'm not leaving this spot until I know she's stable." "This isn't a request, Sergeant. Military protocol doesn't stop because you've developed an emotional attachment to equipment." The word equipment hit James like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Dr. Reed emerged from the operating room, still in his surgical scrubs. His presence seemed to fill the narrow corridor. Colonel Reed's voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to being heard in critical moments. "I need Sergeant Anderson here. Leica's condition is delicate, and having her handler nearby could be crucial for her recovery. You know as well as I do that these dogs aren't just equipment." Thompson's face darkened. "Doctor, you're a civilian consultant. You don't dictate military." "No," Reed interrupted, "but I do dictate medical care in my surgical unit. And right now my patient needs her handler." He turned to James. "She's stable but critical. The next 24 hours will be decisive." Tommy, sensing the tension, began to fuss. Sarah bounced him gently, humming a soft lullaby. The simple domestic sound seemed incongruous in the sterile hospital corridor, yet somehow perfect. "The bullets missed her vital organs," Reed continued, his voice softening as he addressed James directly. "But she lost a lot of blood. She's fighting hard, though. Whatever training you've done with her, whatever bond you've built, it's keeping her going." James nodded, not trusting his voice. Through the window he could see Leica's chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity, sustained by machines and medicine. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen her. "There's something else," Reed added, glancing at Thompson. "The level of trauma response we're seeing. It suggests this isn't her first severe injury. Her medical records seem incomplete." Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "That's classified information, Doctor." "Not anymore," Reed countered. "Not if it affects her treatment. Sergeant Anderson, has Leica ever shown signs of previous combat trauma?" James thought back to their early training days, to the subtle signs he'd noticed but had been ordered to ignore. The way she sometimes startled at certain sounds, her occasional hesitation near specific types of buildings. "Yes," he said finally, "but I was told it was classified." Sarah's hand found his, squeezing gently. Tommy, picking up on some shift in the atmosphere, reached toward the window separating them from Leica. "Dog," he said, clearly one of his first words. The simple declaration seemed to hang in the air, cutting through the complex web of military protocol, medical concerns, and hidden histories. In that moment, James made a decision that would alter not just his career, but the entire trajectory of military working dog programs. "Sir," he addressed Thompson, his voice steady, "I'm formally requesting to adopt Laika upon her recovery, and I'm prepared to take this up the chain of command if necessary." The colonel's expression hardened, but before he could respond, Dr. Reed interjected. "I think that's a discussion for another time. Right now, Laika needs rest, and so do all of you." The first night was the hardest. James maintained his vigil outside Laika's recovery room, watching through the window as machines tracked her vital signs. Dr. Reed had warned him about potential complications: infection, internal bleeding, shock. Each beep of the monitoring equipment seemed to stretch the seconds into hours. Sarah had taken Tommy home, but not before arranging a rotating schedule of support with other military spouses. They brought coffee, sandwiches, and quiet companionship. Lieutenant Parker, his head bandaged, stopped by regularly despite his own injuries. "She saved all of us," he said simply. "We're not letting her fight this alone." The second day brought the first crisis. James was dozing in his chair when alarms started blaring. Dr. Reed and his team rushed past, their faces grim. Laika's temperature had spiked dangerously high, her body fighting a massive infection. "This is what I was afraid of," Reed explained as they worked to stabilize her. "Her previous injuries have compromised her immune system. We're fighting not just today's wounds, but years of accumulated trauma." Through the observation window, James watched as they packed her in ice, administered antibiotics, fought to bring her temperature down. Her powerful frame, usually so strong and vital, looked fragile under the harsh hospital lights. Linda Martinez arrived during the worst of it, her normally composed face etched with concern. She carried a thick folder: Laika's complete service record, obtained through channels she refused to discuss. "You need to see this," she told James, her voice tight. "They've been hiding things from all of us." The documents revealed a pattern: multiple combat injuries, experimental training protocols, deployment schedules that violated standard rest periods. Laika had been pushed far beyond normal operational limits, treated more like a piece of equipment to be used up than a living being. "This stops now," James said, his quiet voice carrying an edge of steel. "No matter what it takes." As if responding to his determination, Laika's condition began to stabilize. Her temperature dropped slowly but steadily. Dr. Reed emerged from her room looking exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "She's fighting back," he said. "But there's something else helping her, something I can't explain medically." That something became clear the next morning when Sarah brought Tommy for another visit. The moment they entered the recovery unit, Laika's vital signs showed a marked improvement. The 1-year-old reached toward the window, pressing his small hand against the glass. Inside, Laika's tail twitched, her first voluntary movement since the surgery. "I've seen this before," Reed commented, watching the monitors with fascination. "Sometimes the will to live is connected to something beyond physical healing. She knows she has a family waiting for her." Colonel Thompson chose that moment to appear, carrying official-looking documents. "Sergeant Anderson, we need to discuss Laika's future. Given her injuries and age, standard protocol calls for." No, James's response was immediate and firm. "You've seen her records now. You know what's been done to her. This ends differently." The colonel's face reddened. "This isn't a negotiation. Military working dogs are government property, and decisions about their disposition are subject to review under the Military Working Dog Protection Act." Linda interrupted, producing her own set of documents. "I've already contacted the Oversight Committee. They're very interested in these records." A tense silence filled the corridor. Inside the recovery room, Laika's monitors continued their steady rhythm, stronger now than hours before. Tommy babbled happily, still pressing his hand against the glass, unaware of the battle of wills taking place around him. Finally, Thompson spoke, his voice carrying a note of resignation. "I'll need time to review the situation with command." "Take all the time you need," James replied, never taking his eyes off Laika. "We're not going anywhere." That evening, as the hospital settled into its night routine, Dr. Reed made an unusual suggestion. "I want to try something," he said, leading James into Laika's room for the first time since the surgery. "Talk to her. Let her hear your voice. Sometimes that connection is the best medicine we have." James settled beside her bed, gently taking one of her paws in his hand. "Hey girl," he whispered, "Tommy's waiting for you. We all are. You just have to keep fighting a little longer." Her eyes flickered beneath closed lids, and the monitors registered a slight but definite change. Somewhere in the depths of healing sleep, Laika was listening. The physical therapy room at the military veterinary hospital had become Laika's battleground. 3 weeks after surgery, James watched as Dr. Reed and his rehabilitation team worked with the wounded German Shepherd. Each step was a deliberate struggle, her once fluid movements now hesitant and measured. "The nerve damage is our biggest concern," Dr. Reed explained, supporting Laika's weight as she attempted to navigate a simple obstacle course. "But she's showing remarkable determination. Most dogs would have given up by now." The psychological assessment proved equally challenging. Linda Martinez observed Laika's reactions to various stimuli, documenting each response with professional precision. The sharp sound of a dropped metal tray sent Laika into a defensive posture, her muscles tensing despite the pain it caused. "Combat trauma manifests differently in working dogs," Martinez explained. Reviewing her notes, "They can't verbalize their experiences, but their bodies remember everything. We're essentially asking her to trust again after every instinct tells her not to." James spent every available moment with Laika, following Dr. Reed's rehabilitation protocol meticulously. He learned to recognize the subtle signs of her discomfort, the slight flattening of her ears, the almost imperceptible shift in her breathing. Their bond, already strong before the incident, deepened through this shared journey of recovery. Sarah brought Tommy for daily visits, turning the sterile hospital environment into something closer to home. The toddler's presence had an almost miraculous effect on Laika's progress. During one particularly difficult therapy session, when Laika seemed ready to quit, Tommy's laugh from the observation area sparked something in her. She completed the exercise, her eyes fixed on the little boy who represented everything normal and peaceful in her world. The adoption process, however, hit unexpected obstacles. Colonel Thompson's initial resistance had evolved into a bureaucratic maze of forms, assessments, and requirements. Each step forward seemed to reveal new complications. "The committee is concerned about liability," Thompson stated during one tense meeting. A combat-trained dog with documented PTSD, living in a civilian environment with a young child, the risks are significant. "With all due respect," Sir James countered, "Laika's already proven herself with Tommy. Dr. Reed's assessments show she's actually calmer around children than most domestic dogs." Dr. Reed supported this observation with detailed behavioral studies, but the military bureaucracy moved at its own pace. Each delay added to the uncertainty of Laika's future, even as her physical condition improved. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a routine evaluation, a junior officer accidentally dropped his clipboard near Laika. The sharp clatter echoed through the room, exactly the kind of trigger that had previously caused her distress. But instead of reacting defensively, Laika remained calm, her attention focused on Tommy, who was playing quietly in the corner. Martinez documented this moment extensively. "This is what we've been waiting for," she told the evaluation committee. "Laika's not just suppressing her trauma responses, she's actively choosing a different reaction. She's prioritizing her role as a family protector over her combat instincts." The breakthrough earned them an unexpected ally. Thompson, who had witnessed the incident, began to shift his position. Perhaps he admitted reluctantly, "We need to reconsider our traditional approaches to retiring military working dogs." As winter turned to spring, Laika's physical rehabilitation progressed steadily. She would never regain the explosive speed that had made her legendary among handlers, but her movements became more assured, her confidence returning day by day. James found himself learning alongside her. Recovery isn't just about getting back to what you were, Dr. Reed told him. It's about finding new ways to be strong. The final psychiatric evaluation loomed ahead, the last major hurdle in their path to adoption. James spent hours preparing Laika, but in the end it was Tommy who provided the most compelling evidence. During the evaluation, the toddler fell asleep against Laika's side, completely trusting. The combat-hardened German Shepherd lay perfectly still, her posture protective rather than tense, watching over the child with gentle attention. Dr. Reed's final report was unequivocal. Laika's recovery demonstrates an exceptional capacity for adaptation and healing. Her bond with the Anderson family, particularly with their young son, provides a stable foundation for continued progress. The Military Review Board convened on a crisp March morning, their polished oak conference table reflecting the fluorescent lights of conference room at Fort Bragg. James Anderson stood at attention, his dress uniform pressed to perfection, while Linda Martinez arranged a formidable stack of documentation before the 7-member panel. Colonel Thompson presided over the proceedings, his expression carefully neutral. We're here to review case number 2024 MWD 847 regarding the proposed civilian adoption of military working dog Laika, service number K489. Sergeant Anderson, you may present your case. James had prepared for this moment for weeks, but the stakes made his throat tight. Distinguished members of the board, I stand before you not just as a handler requesting adoption, but as someone whose life was saved by this extraordinary animal. The presentation that followed was meticulously detailed. Martinez provided comprehensive medical evaluations, behavioral assessments, and adaptation studies. Dr. Reed's testimony, delivered via video conference, carried the weight of his extensive experience with military working dogs. In my professional opinion, Reed stated, his voice clear through the speakers, separating Laika from the Anderson family would be detrimental to her recovery. The bond she's formed, particularly with their young son, has become integral to her rehabilitation process. The questions from the board were pointed and relentless. Major Patricia Wilson, a veteran K-9 program supervisor, raised particular concerns. Sergeant Anderson, how do you plan to manage a combat-trained animal in a civilian environment? These dogs are conditioned for specific responses that could prove dangerous. Before James could respond, a commotion outside the conference room drew everyone's attention. Sarah had arrived, unscheduled, with Tommy and Laika. Through the glass walls, the board members watched as the German Shepherd, now moving with renewed strength, gently guided Tommy away from a cleaning cart that had nearly tipped over. That, James said quietly, is how I plan to manage it. Laika has already adapted. She's chosen her new mission, protecting our family. The incident sparked intense debate among the board members. Major Wilson studied the scene outside, her expression thoughtful. This is unprecedented, she noted. Our protocols for retiring military working dogs don't typically account for this level of family integration. Colonel Thompson cleared his throat. There's another matter to consider. He produced a file stamped with red security classifications. Laika's previous deployment records suggest a pattern of intensive use. The Oversight Committee has expressed concern about potential liability if these details become public. Martinez stepped forward, her voice steady. With respect, Colonel, that's precisely why this adoption is crucial. The military has an opportunity to demonstrate proper care for its working dogs, to set a new standard for retirement and rehabilitation. The deliberations stretched for hours. Outside, Sarah and Tommy waited patiently, Laika a constant guardian at their side. Occasionally, passing soldiers would stop to watch the remarkable sight of a former combat dog playing gentle games with a toddler. Late in the afternoon, a junior officer arrived with an urgent message for Colonel Thompson. The Secretary of the Army's office had taken interest in the case. Public attention, drawn by social media posts about Laika's recovery, had made this more than just a routine administrative decision. Thompson read the message twice before addressing the board. It seems we have guidance from above. The Secretary suggests this case could establish new precedents for the retirement of military working dogs. Major Wilson nodded slowly. Perhaps it's time our policies evolved. These animals serve with distinction. They deserve retirements that honor that service. The final vote was unanimous, but came with conditions. James would need to complete specialized civilian handler training. Regular veterinarian behavioral assessments would be required. The military would maintain certain oversight rights to ensure both Laika's welfare and public safety. As James exited the conference room, Sarah met his eyes questioningly. His smile told her everything. Tommy, understanding something momentous had occurred, wrapped his arms around Laika's neck. The German Shepherd's tail wagged gently, her eyes never leaving her family. Colonel Thompson approached them, his formal demeanor softening slightly. "Sergeant Anderson, the paperwork will be processed by week's end." "Congratulations," he paused, then added more quietly, "take good care of her. She's earned this." The news spread quickly through the base. By evening, a small crowd of well-wishers had gathered outside the veterinary facility. Handlers, soldiers who had worked with Laika, medical staff who had aided her recovery. Their presence testified to the impact one dog had made on an entire military community. The Anderson family home underwent careful transformation in preparation for Laika's permanent arrival. James meticulously followed Dr. Reed's recommendations, creating a peaceful transition environment that would help their former military working dog adapt to civilian life. Sarah had converted their home office into what she called Laika's decompression room, complete with specialized orthopedic bedding to support her healing injuries. The space offered a quiet retreat where Laika could process the dramatic changes in her life. The walls were painted in soothing earth tones, and the windows provided a clear view of their fenced backyard, satisfying her instinct to maintain surveillance while remaining secure. The first morning of Laika's official homecoming crystallized the magnitude of the change. Rather than the stark military kennels or sterile hospital environment, she woke to the sound of Tommy's cheerful morning babble through the baby monitor. James observed as Laika's ears perked up, her tail giving a gentle wag at the familiar sound that now represented her new purpose. "Remember what Dr. Reed said," Sarah reminded James as they watched Laika methodically inspect each room of the house. "She needs to establish her own security protocols. It's how she'll feel safe here." The integration process revealed unexpected challenges and heartwarming surprises. During the first week, a thunderstorm tested their preparation. While many dogs show anxiety during storms, Laika's military training had conditioned her to associate loud noises with threat scenarios. As thunder rolled overhead, she immediately moved to secure Tommy, positioning herself between the toddler and the windows, maintaining her protective stance until the storm passed. "She's not just adjusting," Linda Martinez noted during her weekly observation visit. "She's redefining her mission parameters. Protection without aggression, vigilance without hypervigilance." The neighborhood required careful introduction. James and Sarah developed a systematic approach, gradually expanding Laika's comfort zone through controlled exposure to their suburban environment. The residents of Oak Lane learned to approach slowly, to ask permission before greeting her, to respect the boundaries that helped her feel secure. Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor, became an unexpected ally in Laika's rehabilitation. A retired nurse, she understood the importance of routine and recovery. Her predictable daily schedule of gardening provided Laika with consistent, non-threatening activity to observe from the safety of their yard. Eventually, Laika began to anticipate Mrs. Henderson's appearance each morning, her relaxed posture indicating growing comfort with civilian rhythms. Tommy's role in Laika's integration continued to amaze everyone involved in her case. The toddler instinctively seemed to understand her needs, modulating his naturally boisterous energy when around her. They developed their own communication system, Tommy's gentle pat on her side when he wanted to play, Laika's soft nudge guiding him away from potential hazards. "Their relationship defies conventional behavioral models," Dr. Reed remarked during a follow-up examination. "We typically worry about former combat dogs around small children, but Laika seems to draw stability from Tommy's presence. His innocence helps anchor her to this new reality." The most profound transformation emerged in quiet moments. One Sunday afternoon, James found Laika and Tommy napping together in a patch of sunlight. The former military dog completely relaxed, her vigilant nature temporarily surrendered to the peace of the moment. Sarah captured the image, later sharing it with the military adoption program as evidence of successful integration. Yet challenges remained. The 4th of July loomed as a significant concern. The familiar sounds of fireworks could trigger combat responses in even well-adjusted military dogs. The Andersons prepared thoroughly, working with Dr. Reed to develop a comprehensive management plan. "The key," he explained, "is to create positive associations that override her combat training. We're not trying to erase her past, we're helping her build a new framework for interpreting these triggers." They transformed their basement into a comfort station, equipped with sound-dampening familiar toys and a special area where Tommy could safely interact with Laika during the celebrations. The strategy proved successful. Though James noticed how Leica maintained her protective positioning throughout the evening, her dedication to her new family unwavering even in her anxiety. By the end of summer, Leica's integration had progressed beyond their most optimistic expectations. The military working dog, who had once been deemed too aggressive for civilian adoption, had found her place in the gentle rhythm of family life. Her combat skills hadn't disappeared, they had evolved, channeled into the nuanced art of protecting through presence rather than force. The transformation of a military working dog into a suburban family companion began to ripple through the broader community in unexpected ways. Local media first picked up the story after Leica's appearance at Oak Lane Elementary School's Career Day, where Sarah taught third grade. The sight of the former combat dog gently interacting with students while James explained her military service captured public imagination. The Springfield Herald ran a front-page feature titled "From Battlefield to Backyard, a Warrior's New Mission." The article highlighted not just Leica's journey, but the larger issues surrounding military working dog retirement and rehabilitation. Colonel Thompson, initially resistant to publicity, found himself fielding inquiries from other military installations about the Anderson adoption model. "What we're seeing here represents a paradigm shift," Linda Martinez explained to a gathering of military veterinarians and handlers at Fort Bragg. Leica's case demonstrates that with proper support and understanding, these dogs can successfully transition to civilian life while maintaining their protective instincts in a controlled, appropriate manner. The impact on the local veterans community proved particularly significant. James began receiving requests from former service members struggling with their own transition to civilian life. They found hope in Leica's story, recognizing parallel challenges in their own experiences. Dr. Reed incorporated these observations into a comprehensive study of post-service adaptation. "The psychological parallels between human and canine veterans are remarkable," he noted in his preliminary findings. Leica's success offers valuable insights into the role of family support and purposeful integration in the rehabilitation process. The Anderson home became an unofficial gathering point for an expanding network of military dog handlers and advocates. Weekend gatherings in their backyard provided a safe space for other handlers to seek advice and share experiences. Sarah's homemade chocolate chip cookies became legendary among the group, while Tommy's natural ability to connect with even the most troubled dogs earned him the nickname the Dog Whisperer Jr. Local law enforcement took notice. The police department's K-9 unit commander, Captain Roberts, approached James about developing a retirement program for their service dogs. "Your experience with Leica proves these transitions can work," he explained. "We need to do better by our four-legged officers." The community's embrace of Leica manifested in practical ways. The local veterinary clinic offered specialized services for retired working dogs. Pet stores developed sections dedicated to equipment suitable for former military K-9s. Mrs. Henderson organized a neighborhood support network, ensuring the Andersons had backup care available when needed. However, the increased attention also brought challenges. Some community members expressed concerns about having a combat-trained dog in their neighborhood. James and Sarah addressed these fears through education and transparency, organizing controlled demonstrations of Leica's training and rehabilitation progress. A turning point in community acceptance came during the annual Oak Lane block party. As children played and adults socialized, a car backfired loudly nearby. While several people jumped at the sudden noise, Leica remained calm, maintaining her position near Tommy while scanning for actual threats. Her measured response impressed even the most skeptical neighbors. "That's not just training," Martinez observed to the gathered residents. "That's successful integration. Leica can now distinguish between real threats and normal environmental sounds. She's choosing how to respond rather than reacting instinctively." The academic community began studying the Anderson case as well. Researchers from the State University's Veterinary Behavior Department documented Leica's adaptation process. Their findings challenged traditional assumptions about the rehabilitation potential of military working dogs. By year's end, the impact of Leica's story had extended far beyond their quiet suburban street. The military adoption program reported a significant increase in applications from qualified handlers. More importantly, the quality of post-service care for military working dogs became a topic of national discussion. The late December night started like any other in the Anderson household. Sarah had just finished reading Tommy his bedtime story while James completed his nightly security check, a habit he maintained from his military days. Leica lay in her usual spot near Tommy's door, her breathing steady and calm in the quiet house. At 2:17 a.m., Leica's behavior suddenly changed. Her head lifted sharply, nose working the air with focused intensity. James, awakened by her soft but insistent whine, a sound she rarely made, noticed the change immediately. Years of working together had taught him to trust her instincts without hesitation. "Sarah," he whispered, gently shaking his wife awake. "Something's wrong. Leica's alerting." The German Shepherd was already moving with purpose, her rehabilitation-imposed limitations forgotten as she padded quickly to Tommy's room. Then James smelled at the acrid scent of electrical smoke, faint but unmistakable, seeping through the heating vent in Tommy's room. The next few moments unfolded with the clarity that only true crisis can bring. The home's electrical system, compromised by a faulty wire in the aging furnace, had ignited insulation within the walls. Smoke was beginning to collect near the ceiling, and the temperature in the walls was rising rapidly. "Get Tommy," James commanded, his military training taking over. Sarah scooped up their sleeping son while James called emergency services. Leica positioned herself between the family and the spreading danger, her body language reflecting years of tactical training now focused on civilian protection. The fire department later confirmed that the house's smoke detectors would have activated within minutes, but Leica's early warning had given them precious extra time. As they evacuated through the front door, they could hear the crackle of flames taking hold within the walls. Mrs. Henderson, awakened by the commotion, emerged from her house in a quilted robe. "Bring him here," she called out, already opening her door wide. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and Tommy was wearing only his dinosaur pajamas. From the safety of Mrs. Henderson's living room, they watched as firefighters arrived and began battling the blaze. Tommy, now awake but surprisingly calm, kept one hand buried in Leica's fur. The dog maintained her alert posture, dividing her attention between the child and the ongoing crisis outside. The electrical fire was spreading through the interior walls, the fire chief explained later. "Another few minutes and it would have been a very different situation. Your dog's warning made all the difference." As dawn broke, the full extent of the damage became clear. The house was still standing, but smoke and water damage had rendered it temporarily uninhabitable. The family found themselves facing an unexpected crisis, displaced from their home just days before Christmas. The community's response was immediate. Mrs. Henderson insisted they stay with her until alternative arrangements could be made. Other neighbors arrived with clothing, supplies, and offers of help. The story of Leica's life-saving alert spread quickly through the neighborhood and beyond. Dr. Reed arrived that morning to check on Leica, concerned that the stress of the incident might have aggravated her old injuries. "Remarkable," he commented, completing his examination. "She's showing no signs of physical or psychological distress. Her protective instincts overrode everything else." Colonel Thompson, upon hearing the news, arrived personally to assess the situation. The sight of Leica calmly watching over Tommy as the child played with toys brought by neighbors seemed to affect him deeply. "I was wrong," he admitted to James quietly. "She's not just equipment. She never was." Linda Martinez began documenting the incident for her ongoing study of rehabilitated military working dogs. "This proves what we've been saying," she told James. "These dogs don't lose their training when they retire, they adapt it. Leica translated her combat skills into exactly what your family needed in that moment." The crisis had demonstrated something powerful about the bond between the family and their former military working dog. Leica's actions had proven that successful integration didn't mean erasing her military training, but rather channeling it into a new purpose. As insurance adjusters and contractors came and went, Leica maintained her vigilant but calm presence. She seemed to understand that her family needed her stability now more than ever. Her unwavering dedication provided an anchor point of normalcy in the midst of chaos. In the days following the fire, the Anderson family settled into a temporary routine at Mrs. Henderson's house. The restoration crews worked diligently on their home, but the process would take weeks. Throughout this upheaval, Leica maintained her protective vigilance, though James noticed she seemed increasingly restless at night. On the third evening after the fire, As a winter storm approached, Leica's behavior changed again. She paced between Tommy's temporary bedroom and the window, her attention focused on something beyond the glass. James recognized the signs of her heightened alertness, the slight tension in her shoulders, the purposeful movement of her head. "What is it, girl?" he whispered, joining her at the window. The storm had intensified, driving snow reducing visibility to mere feet. Through the swirling white, James could barely make out the shape of their damaged house across the street. Suddenly, Leica's posture stiffened. Before James could react, she was moving toward Mrs. Henderson's back door with urgent purpose. Her training signals were clear. She had detected something requiring immediate attention. James followed her into the storm, the bitter wind cutting through his clothes. Leica led him toward their house, where restoration workers had left equipment covered under tarps. As they approached, James heard a faint cry carried on the wind. Behind their house, trapped beneath a partially collapsed temporary construction shelter, lay Katie, Mrs. Henderson's 7-year-old granddaughter. She had been playing in the yard when the storm hit, becoming disoriented in the whiteout conditions. The shelter's metal frame, weakened by the accumulating snow, had given way. Leica didn't hesitate. Despite her previous injury, she began carefully excavating the snow around Katie, using her body to shield the child from the wind. James worked alongside her, his military training kicking in as he assessed Katie's condition. She was conscious but severely cold, her winter coat snagged in the metal framework. "Hold on, sweetheart," James reassured her, working to free her clothing. "Leica's got you. We're going to get you out." The German Shepherd positioned herself as a windbreak, her body pressing close to Katie's exposed side, providing what warmth she could. The metal frame groaned ominously above them, more snow accumulating by the second. James managed to free Katie's coat, but as he began to lift her, the structure shifted dangerously. In that critical moment, Leica made a decision. She surged forward, using her body to brace the collapsing frame, creating precious seconds for James to pull Katie to safety. The effort cost her dearly. As James carried Katie clear, the shelter gave way completely. Leica barely managed to lunge free, but not before a metal support struck her left hindquarter, the same leg that had never fully healed from her combat injury. Despite her obvious pain, Leica remained focused on her mission, limping alongside James as he carried Katie back to Mrs. Henderson's house. The child's mother, who had arrived minutes earlier to collect her daughter, broke down at the sight of them emerging from the storm. Dr. Reed arrived within the hour, his face grave as he examined Leica. "The impact has reopened old trauma sites," he explained. "The strain on her previously injured leg. She's going to need immediate surgery if we want to save her mobility." As they prepared to transport Leica to the veterinary hospital, Katie approached the wounded dog. "You saved me," she whispered, gently touching Leica's head. "Just like you saved them in the war." The German Shepherd, despite her pain, offered a gentle tail wag in response. The surgery would be complex, Dr. Reed warned. Leica's previous injuries complicated the procedure, and her age was a factor. But as they loaded her into the veterinary transport, her eyes remained fixed on her family, particularly Tommy, who watched with solemn understanding beyond his years. "She didn't even hesitate," Mrs. Henderson remarked, holding her granddaughter close. "Not for a second, even with everything she's been through." James knelt beside Leica before they departed, his hand resting gently on her head. "You've saved us again, girl," he said softly. "Now let us save you." The veterinary surgical center hummed with controlled urgency as Dr. Reed prepared for what would become a 7-hour procedure. The facility, normally closed at this late hour, had been specially opened for Leica's emergency surgery. A team of specialists was assembled, drawn by both the urgency of the case and the growing reputation of the former military working dog. "The impact has destabilized the previous surgical repairs," Dr. Reed explained to James and Sarah in the consultation room. His detailed scans showed the extent of the damage, multiple compromise points where old injuries intersected with new trauma. "We're looking at a complex reconstruction. The risk factors are significant." Colonel Thompson arrived unexpectedly, still in his dress uniform from an evening function. "I've contacted the Military Working Dog Program's medical division," he announced. "They're sending their surgical records and offering consultation support. Whatever resources you need, doctor, they're yours." The waiting room filled as news spread. Linda Martinez brought coffee and stayed to document the case. Katie's parents came to show support, their daughter insisting on bringing her favorite blanket for Leica. Mrs. Henderson organized a rotation of neighbors to ensure someone was always present with the Andersons. Tommy, fighting sleep in his father's lap, clutched Leica's worn service collar. The veterinary staff had removed it for surgery, but the child refused to let it go. She needs it back, he insisted with the simple logic of a toddler. It helps her be brave. The first hours of surgery proved challenging. Dr. Reed encountered more extensive damage than initially anticipated. The previous combat injuries had created a complex network of scar tissue that complicated every step of the procedure. Each decision required careful balance between addressing immediate trauma and preserving long-term function. Her resilience is remarkable, Dr. Reed reported during a brief consultation break. Most dogs would have gone into shock by now. She's fighting with everything she has. In the waiting room, James paced, his military training warring with parental instinct. Sarah maintained a calm exterior for Tommy's sake, but her hands trembled slightly as she accepted another cup of coffee from Mrs. Anderson. The hours stretched endlessly. Near midnight, a complication arose. Leica's vital signs began to fluctuate dangerously. Dr. Reed's team worked frantically to stabilize her, their quiet efficiency betraying the seriousness of the situation. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. We're at a critical point, Dr. Reed emerged to explain. Her body has been through tremendous trauma, both past and present. The next hour will determine everything. Linda Martinez, who had been reviewing Leica's complete medical history, made a crucial observation. There's a pattern in her recovery data from previous surgeries, she pointed out. Her responses stabilized significantly when in proximity to her handler. Dr. Reed made an unprecedented decision. Breaking with standard surgical protocol, he allowed James to enter the sterile area properly gowned and masked. The father's presence near the operating table had an almost immediate effect on Leica's vital signs. Talk to her, Dr. Reed instructed, never taking his eyes off his work. Let her hear your voice. James leaned close to Leica's ear, his voice steady despite his emotions. Tommy's waiting for you, girl. We all are. You've never quit on us. Don't start now. The surgical team worked through the night. Outside, the winter storm raged on, but within the operating room, a different kind of battle was being waged. Every suture, every careful repair represented another step in Leica's long journey from military working dog to beloved family member. Dawn was breaking when Dr. Reed finally stepped back from the operating table. His exhaustion was evident, but his eyes held cautious optimism. She's stable, he announced. The repairs are holding, now we wait. The first 48 hours after surgery proved the most challenging of the Anderson family's journey with Leica. Despite Dr. Reed's skilled intervention, the German Shepherd remained unresponsive, her powerful frame unnaturally still in the recovery ward. The medical equipment surrounding her bed provided a stark reminder of the severity of her condition. The combined trauma of her previous injuries and the recent accident has overwhelmed her system, Dr. Reed explained during his morning rounds. His typically confident demeanor showed signs of strain. We're seeing concerning patterns in her vital signs. Her body may be reaching its limits. James maintained his vigil beside Leica's bed, speaking to her softly about home, about Tommy, about the simple daily routines they had developed together. Sarah brought Tommy for brief visits, carefully explaining to the toddler why his beloved guardian couldn't respond to his presence as she usually did. When will she wake up? Daddy Tommy asked, his small hand resting on Leica's unmoving paw. The question hung heavy in the sterile air of the recovery room. Colonel Thompson visited daily, his formal military bearing softening as he observed the family's vigil. During one visit, he placed Leica's service medals on her recovery bed. These were earned, he said quietly, both in combat and in civilian life. She deserves to wear them one last time. The implications of his words sent a chill through the room. Linda Martinez, who had been documenting Leica's case for the military working dog program, set down her notebook, unable to maintain professional detachment. On the third morning, Leica's condition deteriorated significantly. Her breathing became labored, and her cardiac readings showed increasing irregularity. Dr. Reed called an emergency consultation with his medical team. "We have to consider quality of life," he stated, his voice heavy with professional compassion. "The damage may be too extensive for her to recover without significant suffering." The conversation that followed was one of the hardest James had ever faced, harder even than combat decisions that had meant life or death. The medical team presented options, each one more heartbreaking than the last. Sarah held his hand as they listened, tears falling silently. Mrs. Henderson organized a neighborhood prayer circle. The local news caught wind of the story, and messages of support flooded in from across the country. Veterans who had served with Laika sent letters sharing memories of her courage and dedication. Katie, the young girl Laika had saved from the storm, brought her school project to the clinic, a hand-drawn picture of Laika as a superhero, complete with a cape. "Heroes don't die," she insisted with childhood certainty, but her mother's eyes reflected the adult's understanding of reality. As Laika's condition continued to decline, Dr. Reed prepared the family for the possibility of having to make the most difficult decision. Sometimes, he explained gently, the kindest thing we can do is let them go. The Military Veterinary Corps sent a representative to discuss formal honors. They offered a full military ceremony, recognition of her service both in combat and civilian life. The gesture, while well-intentioned, felt like a premature acceptance of defeat. Tommy, with a child's intuitive understanding, climbed carefully onto Laika's bed during one visit. He laid his head against her chest, listening to her heartbeat as he had done countless times at home. "Wake up," he whispered. "Please wake up. You're my best friend." The room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. James watched his son, remembering all the moments Laika had protected him, all the times she had put their family's safety above her own comfort and recovery. Dr. Reed entered with the latest test results, his expression grave. "We need to make a decision soon," he said softly. "Her system is shutting down. We can keep her comfortable," but he left the sentence unfinished. The news of Laika's critical condition spread rapidly through both military and civilian channels. The Springfield Herald ran a comprehensive feature titled "A Hero's Final Battle," detailing her journey from combat service to civilian life. The article highlighted her recent rescue of Katie Henderson during the winter storm, presenting it as potentially her final act of sacrifice. Colonel Thompson found himself addressing an impromptu press conference outside the veterinary clinic. "Military working dog Laika represents the highest traditions of service," he stated, his usual military formality tinged with genuine emotion. "Her transition to civilian life has redefined how we approach K9 retirement and rehabilitation." Veterans organizations across the country began mobilizing support. The American Legion Post in Springfield established the Laika Fund, aimed at supporting medical care for retired military working dogs. Within 48 hours, donations exceeded $100,000, highlighting the public's emotional investment in her story. Local schools incorporated Laika's story into their curriculum. At Oak Lane Elementary, where Sarah taught, students created a wall of cards and drawings. One third grader's message particularly resonated: "Thank you for teaching us that heroes come in all forms." The professional veterinary community engaged in intense discussion about the case. Dr. Reed received numerous consultations from specialists worldwide, offering suggestions and support. The Journal of Veterinary Medicine expressed interest in publishing a comprehensive study of Laika's case, recognizing its significance for both military and civilian veterinary practice. Linda Martinez's documentation gained unprecedented attention within military circles. Her reports on Laika's successful integration into civilian life had already influenced policy discussions regarding military working dog retirement. Now, her detailed accounts of Laika's impact on community safety and family dynamics added new dimensions to the ongoing debate. Social media amplified the story's reach. Save a Laika began trending nationally, with thousands sharing their own experiences with service animals. Military K9 handlers posted photos of their dogs, expressing solidarity and understanding of the profound bond between handler and animal. The mayor of Springfield issued a formal proclamation recognizing Laika's contributions to community safety. In a public statement, he emphasized how one dog had transformed public understanding of both military service animals and veteran reintegration. Katie Henderson's parents appeared on local television, recounting how Laika had saved their daughter despite her own previous injuries. Their emotional testimony resonated with viewers, generating renewed discussion about the capacity of service animals to maintain their protective instincts even in retirement. Military families across the country began sharing similar stories of working dogs who had successfully transitioned to civilian life. These accounts, while offering hope, also highlighted the systemic challenges faced by retiring military canines and their handlers. Dr. Reed found himself addressing professional conferences via video link, explaining the unique medical challenges presented by Laika's case. His presentations emphasized the need for specialized protocols in treating former military working dogs, whose bodies carried the cumulative impact of their service. The story reached Congress, where representatives began discussing legislation to improve support for retiring military working dogs. Dubbed Laika's Law, the proposed bill would establish comprehensive medical care and rehabilitation programs for K-9 veterans. Colonel Thompson, in a surprising shift from his earlier positions, became a vocal advocate for reform. "Watching Laika's journey has changed my perspective," he admitted in a military policy review. "These animals deserve more than our gratitude. They deserve our commitment to their well-being after service." As Laika fought for her life, her impact continued to ripple outward. Letters arrived at the clinic from around the world, many from children who had been moved by her story. They wrote of courage, loyalty, and the special bond between humans and animals. James Anderson sat alone in the veterinary clinic's chapel at midnight, his military composure finally cracking under the weight of impending loss. The stark reality of potentially losing Laika affected him more deeply than any combat experience. His hands trembled as he held her worn service collar, his fingers tracing the identification tags that had accompanied them through war and peace. "I don't know how to tell Tommy," he confided to Sarah when she found him there. "How do you explain to a child that sometimes heroes don't make it, even when they do everything right?" His voice, steady through countless military briefings, wavered with emotion. Sarah, maintaining strength for both her husband and son, wrapped her arms around him. "Tommy understands more than we think," she said softly. "He knows Laika fought for us, just like you did. That's a legacy that never dies." The strain showed differently on each family member. Sarah found herself constantly straightening Tommy's room at Mrs. Henderson's house, organizing and reorganizing the toys that Laika used to guard so carefully. The empty space where the German Shepherd should have been felt like a physical presence. Tommy developed a ritual of laying out Laika's favorite toys each night before bed, arranging them precisely as she would have liked. "They need to be ready when she comes home," he explained with unwavering certainty. The simple faith in his statement made the adult's knowledge of reality even harder to bear. Dr. Reed, normally able to maintain professional distance, found himself emotionally invested in unprecedented ways. His office walls, usually decorated with veterinary certificates, now held drawings from local children depicting Laika as their guardian angel. Each morning, reviewing her deteriorating vital signs, he felt the weight of not just one family's hopes, but an entire community's. The nursing staff noticed James would sometimes talk to Laika about their combat experiences during the quiet night hours. These one-sided conversations revealed the depth of their connection. Missions completed, lives saved, trust earned in the crucible of war. One nurse documented how Laika's vital signs seemed to stabilize slightly during these intimate moments of remembrance. Colonel Thompson, visiting late one evening, found James in the recovery room. The older officer stood silently for a moment before speaking. "I was wrong about her, Anderson. About all of them. They're not equipment. They're soldiers through and through. And she's one of the finest I've ever known." Linda Martinez continued her documentation, though her clinical notes increasingly reflected personal investment. "Subject demonstrates extraordinary will to live," she wrote, then added in a less professional addendum, "She's fighting for her family. Everything we've learned about K-9 rehabilitation comes down to this: they never stop serving, never stop protecting." The psychological impact on the community manifested in touching ways. Local children began leaving their nightlights on to help guide Laika home. Veterans groups organized round-the-clock prayer vigils. Mrs. Henderson's garden, where Laika had spent countless peaceful hours, became an unofficial gathering place for neighbors to share stories and support. Katie visited daily, reading storybooks to the unconscious dog who had saved her life. Her innocent voice carried through the recovery ward, telling tales of brave dogs and happy endings. The medical staff found themselves working around these reading sessions, recognizing their therapeutic value for both the young girl and the grieving family. As days passed without improvement, James struggled with the decision they all knew was approaching. His military training had prepared him for making life and death choices, but nothing had prepared him for this. The weight of being the one to potentially end Leica's fight felt unbearable. On the 7th day of Leica's critical condition, an extraordinary sequence of events began to unfold at the veterinary clinic. The morning started routinely enough, with Dr. Reed conducting his early rounds and reviewing the latest test results. The medical team had begun preparing the family for the possibility of saying goodbye. At precisely 7:15 a.m., Tommy arrived for his daily visit, clutching a new drawing he had made during breakfast. Despite the somber atmosphere, he maintained his ritual of climbing carefully onto the chair beside Leica's bed. Sarah and James watched with heavy hearts as their son began his usual one-sided conversation with his unconscious guardian. "I drew us at the park," Tommy explained to Leica, holding the picture where he imagined she could see it. "See? You're catching the ball, and I'm throwing it really far, just like before." What happened next would be documented extensively in Dr. Reed's medical records. As Tommy continued describing his drawing, one of Leica's ears twitched a subtle movement, but unmistakable. The monitoring equipment registered a slight but definite change in her vital signs. "She heard me," Tommy exclaimed, his excitement drawing the immediate attention of the medical staff. Dr. Reed rushed to examine Leica, his experienced hands checking vital signs while his eyes studied the monitoring equipment with intense focus. Over the next hour, Leica displayed increasing signs of responsiveness. Her breathing pattern changed, becoming stronger and more regular. Her cardiac reading showed improvement, and her body temperature began stabilizing within normal ranges. "This is remarkable," Dr. Reed stated, his professional demeanor barely containing his excitement. "Her system is showing signs of spontaneous recovery. The prolonged rest period may have allowed her body to marshal its resources." James remained cautiously optimistic, his military training making him wary of false hope. However, as the morning progressed, Leica's improvement became undeniable. By noon, she had opened her eyes, her gaze immediately seeking out Tommy, who had refused to leave her side. Colonel Thompson arrived for his daily visit to find an atmosphere transformed. The recovery room, which had been shrouded in pending grief for days, now hummed with cautious optimism. Medical staff moved with renewed energy, documenting every positive change in Leica's condition. "Her recovery pattern is unprecedented," Dr. Reed explained during an impromptu medical conference. "The combination of emergency surgery, prolonged rest, and what appears to be a powerful emotional connection to her family has produced results we wouldn't have thought possible." Linda Martinez began recording what she termed the Tommy effect, the marked improvement in Leica's vital signs whenever the young boy was present. The data suggested that the bond between child and dog had created a unique healing dynamic. But by evening, Leica had progressed to lifting her head and responding to simple commands. Her tail, though weak, managed small wags when Tommy spoke to her. The medical team, while maintaining professional caution, allowed themselves to discuss recovery plans rather than end-of-life care. Sarah observed a profound change in her husband as well. The weight of impending loss lifted from his shoulders, replaced by the focused determination she recognized from his military days. James began working with Dr. Reed to develop a rehabilitation strategy, drawing on his experience with Leica's previous recovery. The news of Leica's improvement spread quickly through the clinic and beyond. Mrs. Henderson arrived with a homemade stew, insisting that the family needed to keep up their strength for the recovery journey ahead. Katie brought fresh drawings from her classmates, decorating the recovery room walls with colorful hopes for the future. Dr. Reed's evening assessment confirmed what everyone had dared to hope: Leica had turned a corner. While significant challenges lay ahead, her vital signs continued to strengthen, and her responses grew more coordinated with each passing hour. During Leica's recovery period, Linda Martinez made a discovery that would fundamentally change the military's approach to working dog programs. While reviewing Leica's complete service records for rehabilitation planning, she uncovered a pattern of systematic documentation irregularities spanning several years. In a private meeting with James and Colonel Thompson, Martinez presented her findings. These records show Laika was deployed for multiple high-risk operations without mandatory rest periods, she explained, spreading documents across the conference room table. The dates, locations, and injury reports don't align with standard protocols. Colonel Thompson studied the evidence, his expression growing increasingly grave. The documents revealed that Laika had been part of an unofficial accelerated deployment program, pushing military working dogs beyond established safety limits. The program had been carefully concealed through manipulated documentation and compartmentalized information. This wasn't just about Laika, Martinez continued. There are references to other dogs in the program. The injury rates were significant, but the data was deliberately obscured to prevent oversight. James absorbed this information with growing anger, remembering the countless times Laika had shown signs of previous trauma during their early training together. "Who authorized this?" he asked, his voice controlled but intense. Colonel Thompson cleared his throat. "I was aware of the program," he admitted. "We were under intense pressure to maintain K-9 unit availability in high-priority areas. The decision was made at multiple levels to maximize deployment efficiency, even if it meant compromising certain standards." Dr. Reed, called in to review the medical implications, provided professional context. "These records explain the complexity of Laika's injuries," he stated. "Her body was carrying the cumulative impact of multiple traumas, each new injury compounding previous damage that hadn't fully healed. The implications extended beyond individual cases. The program had effectively treated military working dogs as expendable resources, prioritizing short-term operational needs over long-term sustainability and animal welfare. The recent crisis with Laika had brought these systemic issues into sharp focus." Colonel Thompson, to his credit, chose accountability. He initiated a formal review of the program, working with Martinez to identify all affected animals and handlers. "This stops now," he declared. "These dogs deserve better, and so do their handlers." The investigation revealed a broader pattern of policy failures. Military working dogs had been repeatedly deployed into high-risk situations without proper medical clearance. Recovery periods were shortened or skipped entirely. Training protocols were accelerated beyond safe limits. James found himself at the center of a growing reform movement within the military working dog program. His experience with Laika's rehabilitation provided a blueprint for change. "These dogs give everything they have," he testified at a military review board. "They deserve more than being treated as disposable assets." The truth had far-reaching consequences. Senior officers who had authorized the accelerated deployment program faced disciplinary action. New protocols were established for tracking and monitoring military working dog deployments. Mandatory rest periods became strictly enforced. Dr. Reed's medical documentation of Laika's case proved instrumental in developing new treatment guidelines. "Understanding the full history helps us provide better care," he explained during a veterinary conference. "These animals carry the physical and psychological impact of their service. We need to honor that in their treatment." Colonel Thompson, transformed by the experience, became an unexpected advocate for reform. "I was wrong," he acknowledged publicly. "These dogs are more than equipment. They're soldiers who deserve our full measure of respect and care." The revelation sparked changes beyond military circles. Civilian law enforcement agencies began reviewing their own K-9 deployment policies. Veterinary programs developed specialized protocols for treating former service animals. The ripple effects of Laika's story continued to expand. The evolution that followed the revelations about the military working dog program manifested across multiple levels, transforming both institutions and individuals. At the veterinary clinic, Laika's recovery progressed steadily, her journey becoming a case study in rehabilitation and resilience. Dr. Reed documented significant improvements in Laika's physical condition. Her previously compromised leg showed increased strength and mobility, responding well to the modified rehabilitation protocols. The comprehensive understanding of her service history allowed for more targeted treatment approaches. James Anderson found himself in a new role as an advocate for military working dog welfare. His testimony before military review boards carried the weight of both handler experience and personal investment. These animals serve with total dedication, he explained to a panel of senior officers. Our obligation to them extends beyond their active duty years. Colonel Thompson demonstrated perhaps the most remarkable transformation. The officer who had once dismissed military working dogs as equipment became a leading voice for reform. He worked closely with Martinez to implement new tracking systems for K-9 deployments, ensuring proper rest periods and medical evaluations. The changes reached beyond policy documents into daily operations. Training protocols were revised to emphasize long-term sustainability over short-term deployment readiness. Veteran handlers were consulted to develop more humane and effective methods. The focus shifted from maximizing operational tempo to maintaining healthy, capable working dogs. Sarah Anderson observed the impact in her classroom, where Leica's story had sparked ongoing discussions about service, sacrifice, and responsibility. Her third-grade students developed a deeper understanding of both military service and animal welfare. They're learning that doing the right thing sometimes means changing how we've always done things, she noted. Tommy's relationship with Leica continued to evolve during her recovery. The bond between them strengthened through daily rehabilitation exercises, with the young boy's presence providing motivation for the healing dog. Dr. Reed incorporated this connection into his treatment plans, recognizing the therapeutic value of their interactions. The community's involvement deepened. Mrs. Henderson coordinated a neighborhood support network for families fostering retired military working dogs. Local businesses contributed to rehabilitation programs. The Springfield Herald ran a series of articles highlighting successful transitions from military to civilian life for both handlers and their K-9 partners. Linda Martinez's documentation expanded into a comprehensive study of military working dog welfare. Her research provided a foundation for new policies and procedures, emphasizing the importance of treating these animals as valued service members rather than tactical assets. Professional veterinary journals published her findings, influencing practices beyond military circles. The transformation extended to the broader military community. Other bases began reviewing their K-9 programs, implementing reforms based on the lessons learned from Leica's case. Handler training programs incorporated new modules on long-term canine health and welfare. The culture began to shift from viewing dogs as deployable resources to recognizing them as essential team members deserving of career-long support. Dr. Reed established a specialized clinic for retired military and law enforcement dogs, incorporating the insights gained from Leica's treatment. Every case teaches us something new, he explained to his staff. These animals have unique needs arising from their service. Our obligation is to understand and meet those needs. The legislative impact proved significant. Lawmakers used the documented evidence of previous program deficiencies to strengthen protections for military working dogs. New regulations mandated comprehensive health care throughout their service years and into retirement. Funding was allocated for specialized veterinary programs focused on service animal care. For the Anderson family, the transformation manifested in daily moments of joy and progress. Leica's recovery, while challenging, demonstrated the resilience that had characterized her entire career. Her adaptation to civilian life, once questioned by skeptics, became a model for successful military working dog retirement. Spring arrived in Springfield with renewed promise as the Anderson family finally returned to their restored home. The house had been completely renovated following the winter's electrical fire, with special modifications designed to accommodate Leica's rehabilitation needs. Wide hallways, non-slip flooring, and a custom-built therapy area in the backyard reflected their commitment to her continued recovery. 3 months after her near-fatal injury, Leica moved through the house with increasing confidence. Though her gait retained a slight irregularity, Dr. Reed's innovative treatment protocols had restored significant mobility. Her daily routine now included structured rehabilitation exercises, interspersed with periods of rest and family interaction. James Anderson's career took an unexpected but fulfilling turn. The military recognized his expertise in working dog rehabilitation by appointing him as a special advisor to the newly established K-9 Veteran Care Initiative. In this role, he divided his time between consulting on policy reforms and working directly with handlers transitioning their dogs to civilian life. The key is understanding that each dog's journey is unique, James explained during a training session for new handlers. What we learned from Leica's case is that successful rehabilitation requires a combination of medical care, emotional support, and patient adaptation to civilian routines. Sarah found her teaching career enriched by their experiences. Her classroom became a model for incorporating lessons about service, responsibility, and animal welfare into the standard curriculum. Students particularly responded to periodic visits from Leica, who demonstrated remarkable gentleness with children despite her military background. Tommy, now approaching his 3rd birthday, developed an intuitive understanding of Leica's needs. He learned to recognize signs of fatigue in his canine companion and would often guide her to her rest area without prompting. Their bond deepened through shared activities adapted to her capabilities, such as gentle fetch games and basic training exercises. Dr. Reed's veterinary practice evolved to specialize in rehabilitation care for service animals. The protocols developed during Leica's recovery became the foundation for a comprehensive treatment program. "We're seeing remarkable success rates with long-term rehabilitation," he reported at a veterinary conference. "The key is treating each case as unique while applying proven principles of physical and emotional support." Colonel Thompson, true to his transformed perspective, implemented sweeping changes in the military working dog program. Training schedules were restructured to prioritize animal welfare alongside operational requirements. Regular health assessments became mandatory, with detailed tracking of cumulative stress impacts. Linda Martinez's research expanded into a formal study of successful military to civilian transitions for working dogs. Her findings emphasized the importance of family integration and community support in rehabilitation outcomes. The Anderson case demonstrates that these dogs can not only recover but thrive when given appropriate support systems, she noted in her published findings. The local community's involvement continued to grow. Mrs. Henderson's informal support network evolved into a structured organization providing assistance to families adopting retired service dogs. Local businesses contributed to a fund supporting specialized veterinary care for K-9 veterans. The Springfield Herald's coverage expanded to include a regular column on service animal welfare. Katie, whose life Leica had saved during the winter storm, became a regular visitor to the Anderson home. Her presence served as a reminder of both Leica's heroism and the ongoing impact of their story on the community. The young girl's interest in veterinary medicine, inspired by her experience, led to her participation in junior animal care programs. The house itself became a model for adaptive rehabilitation environments. Features designed for Leica's recovery needs were incorporated into recommendations for other families adopting retired service dogs. The backyard therapy area, in particular, demonstrated how residential spaces could be modified to support ongoing rehabilitation. James and Sarah observed positive changes in their family dynamics. The challenges they had faced strengthened their bonds and deepened their understanding of service and sacrifice. Their experience provided valuable insights for other families preparing to adopt retired military working dogs. Dr. Reed's follow-up assessments consistently showed Leica's progress exceeding expectations. Her recovery demonstrates the remarkable resilience these animals possess, he noted. When provided with appropriate support and care, they can overcome significant trauma to enjoy fulfilled lives. The influence of Leica's story extended far beyond Springfield, catalyzing significant changes in military and civilian approaches to service animal welfare. The Military Working Dog Protection Act, passed with bipartisan support, established comprehensive standards for K-9 service members throughout their careers and into retirement. The legislation incorporated many lessons learned from Leica's case. Mandatory rest periods between deployments became federal law. Health monitoring protocols developed from Dr. Reed's research set new standards for medical care. The act also guaranteed retirement benefits, including veterinary care coverage for service-related conditions. Professional veterinary organizations adopted specialized certification programs for treating retired military working dogs. The American Veterinary Medical Association established guidelines based on Dr. Reed's treatment protocols. These standards emphasize the unique physical and psychological needs of animals transitioning from military to civilian life. James Anderson's role expanded to include consulting with law enforcement agencies nationwide. police departments sought his expertise in developing retirement programs for their K-9 officers. His presentations focused on practical implementation of the lessons learned from Leica's rehabilitation. Success requires systematic support, from medical care to family integration to community engagement. The academic community embraced the opportunities for research. Universities established dedicated programs studying the long-term effects of military service on working dogs. Linda Martinez's methodologies became standard references in the field, emphasizing the importance of comprehensive documentation and follow-up studies. Colonel Thompson's transformation influenced military leadership perspectives. His advocacy led to the establishment of the K-9 Service Member Support Office, dedicated to overseeing working dog welfare throughout their careers. The office coordinated with civilian agencies to ensure continuity of care during transition periods. International interest grew as other nations' military and law enforcement agencies recognized the value of the American reforms. Delegations visited Springfield to observe the programs developed through Leica's case. The principles of comprehensive care and supported transition became models for global implementation. The insurance industry responded by developing specialized coverage for retired service animals. These policies, inspired by the medical challenges faced during Leica's recovery, provided financial protection for families adopting military working dogs. The coverage included rehabilitation services and ongoing care for service-related conditions. Media coverage expanded beyond local interest to national attention. Documentary filmmakers captured the evolving story of military working dog welfare reform. Their work highlighted both individual success stories and the broader systematic changes sparked by Leica's case. Dr. Reed's veterinary practice became a teaching center for specialists in service animal rehabilitation. Veterinarians from across the country participated in training programs, learning advanced techniques for treating former military working dogs. The practice's success rates demonstrated the effectiveness of comprehensive rehabilitation approaches. The Springfield community model for supporting retired service animals spread to other cities. Local organizations nationwide adopted programs based on Mrs. Henderson's support network. These groups facilitated successful transitions for hundreds of retiring military working dogs and their adoptive families. Educational institutions incorporated service animal welfare into their curricula. Sarah Anderson's classroom methods were adapted for broader implementation. Students across the country learned valuable lessons about responsibility, service, and the human-animal bond through these programs. The economic impact proved significant as specialized industries developed around service animal retirement care. Manufacturing companies created adaptive equipment for rehabilitation. Training facilities incorporated dedicated programs for transitioning military dogs. The support services expanded to meet the growing needs of adoptive families. Professional organizations established standards for handler training in civilian settings. These guidelines, influenced by James Anderson's experiences, emphasize the unique challenges of working with retired military dogs. Certification programs ensured handlers possessed the necessary skills for successful transitions. The broader impact extended to public awareness and appreciation for service animals. Communities nationwide recognized the ongoing contributions of retired military working dogs. Support programs received increased funding and volunteer participation, ensuring sustainable resources for future retirees. 1 year after her life-saving surgery, the Anderson family gathered in their backyard for a special celebration. The occasion marked not just Leica's recovery, but the inauguration of the National Military Working Dog Memorial Garden, with their home serving as the first dedicated site. The garden, designed with input from both military veterans and landscape architects, featured accessible paths that allowed service dogs of varying mobility levels to navigate comfortably. A central bronze statue depicted a military working dog in both combat and civilian poses, representing the dual nature of their service and retirement. James Anderson, now a recognized authority in military working dog rehabilitation, stood before the assembled crowd. His speech reflected the journey that had transformed not just his family but an entire system. Today, we honor not just Leica but every military working dog who has served our nation. Their dedication deserves nothing less than our complete commitment to their well-being. Colonel Thompson, recently promoted to oversee the National K-9 Veteran Program, presented Leica with a special commendation. The ceremony marked the first time a retired military working dog received formal recognition for both military and civilian heroism. The citation specifically mentioned her rescue of Katie Henderson during the winter storm. Dr. Reed used the occasion to announce the establishment of the Leica Foundation for Military Working Dog Care, dedicated to supporting veterinary research and treatment for retired service dogs. The Foundation's first initiative would fund specialized training for veterinarians in military dog rehabilitation. Tommy, now more articulate at age 3, participated in the ceremony by helping to unveil the memorial plaque. His natural interaction with Leica demonstrated the successful integration they had achieved. The German Shepherd, though graying slightly around her muzzle, maintained her protective yet gentle demeanor with the child. Linda Martinez presented the first comprehensive study of reformed military working dog programs, dedicating the research to Leica's influence on policy changes. The data showed significant improvements in both active duty and retirement outcomes under the new protocols. Mrs. Henderson, representing the community support network she had established, announced the expansion of their program to 20 other cities. What began as Neighbors Helping Neighbors has grown into a national movement, she explained, her voice carrying the pride of grassroots success. The celebration included demonstrations of Leica's ongoing work with the children's education program at Oak Lane Elementary. Though no longer able to perform the physical feats of her military days, she showed remarkable skill in helping young students overcome their fears of dogs and learn about responsible animal care. Sarah Anderson shared how their experience had enriched her teaching curriculum. These children are learning empathy, responsibility, and the true meaning of service through their interactions with Leica. These lessons will shape their understanding of duty and compassion for years to come. As evening approached, the formal ceremony gave way to quiet celebration. Leica lay contentedly on her special mat, surrounded by family and friends who had supported her journey. Tommy sat beside her, gently stroking her fur as she watched over the gathering with alert but peaceful attention. James and Sarah observed their transformed family, a retired military working dog who had become an integral part of their lives, a son who had learned profound lessons about love and dedication, and a community forever changed by their shared experience. The legacy of their story continued to influence policies and practices across the nation. But perhaps the most meaningful impact could be seen in the simple moments, Leica guiding Tommy away from potential dangers, her gentle presence during stormy nights, her unwavering dedication to her newfound civilian mission. As the sun set on the celebration, Leica's story stood as a testament to the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals, the importance of never giving up on those who serve, and the power of community to effect meaningful change. Her journey from military working dog to beloved family member and catalyst for reform had transformed not just one family's life, but the lives of countless others who would follow in her pawprints. In the twilight of our years, we often reflect on the profound bonds that define a life well lived. Leica's story reminds us of the values that our generation holds dear: unwavering loyalty, selfless service, and the deep connections that transcend the boundaries between humans and animals. Like many of us who served our country or supported those who did, this German Shepherd demonstrated that our capacity for duty and love doesn't end with retirement. Her journey mirrors our own transitions from the structured purpose of our working years to the equally meaningful role of family guardian and community member. Just as we've adapted to new chapters in our lives, Leica showed that with understanding, patience, and support, we can find renewed purpose and joy in different forms of service. Perhaps most touching is how her story bridges generations, from veterans who understand the sacrifice of service to grandchildren like Tommy, who carry forward the lessons of compassion and dedication. In these challenging times when many feel our traditional values are fading, Leica's legacy reminds us that the principles of loyalty, duty, and unconditional love remain as powerful as ever, binding together families and communities in ways that only our generation can truly appreciate. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.